Today we are going to see, what if Naruto combined chakra and haki to break limits? Part 8. So let's get started. Naruto motioned his cup to Hinata, who poured him a refill of tea. He thanked her gratefully, but he still felt put off by the kunoichi's vibe. Something wrong? Hinata shook her head. Regardless, ever being the observant one, Shino made a response in her stead. Obviously, something is. She's probably feeling irked because of your overwillingness to help Fu and her team. Have you forgotten? Everyone's our enemies in the exams. Of course I know that. Naruto looked around the tiny waiting booth they were sitting in, almost as if he was checking to see if there was any way that anyone could be listening in on them. Confirming that the rooms were soundproofed, he continued. I know that everyone's a combatant, and everyone's an enemy. It's not like I've forgotten how Shikamaru threatened to make Rock Lee stab me full of holes with a coup. Nigh or how Tenten nearly hammered me with her mace or how Fu-chan almost took my head off. Indeed about Fu-chan, Shino muttered. That's the topic. You went all out to fight the Kumo team and nearly endangered the both of us just to give the odd seal to Fu-chan. Naruto narrowed his eyes. I don't think I like the tone you're using for her name. Well, Hinata's probably wanting to question on the relations you have with her, but my query is more detailed. How did you come to know her, and for how long? To this, Naruto refused to answer, and this made Hinata frown. Are we that untrustworthy, Naruto-kun? Why are you so secretive? The Uzumaki shrugged. It's just this time. I'm not really secretive. Yes, you are, Hinata interjected loudly. Naruto looked up in surprise, as this temperament was uncharacteristic of the Hyuga. As if realizing this fact, her voice fell. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have secrets. I don't understand what makes us so hard to trust. You know everything about us, and yet our own teammate and friend still tries to hold on to every detail we haven't seen for ourselves and lies about them every time. This only denies us every opportunity to get to know Naruto Uzumaki better. For a moment, Hinata thought that she had gotten through to him, but the moment was somewhat spoiled by what Shino said next. He's insecure about his secrets. It's why he acted up so strongly when I planted my Kikaichu on him in Nami no Kuni, although that was mostly done so that I could understand his melodrama. That's what you're calling it? Melodrama? Naruto said in disgust. His expression softened, however, when he saw how Hinata looked concerned instead of merely curious, something that baffled him. For the first time in a long time, Naruto opened the door, so to speak, and let them in. My name's Naruto. I'm an orphan. I learned later that I was born on the 10th of October. But no one seemed to know my parents. If they do, they're not telling. But I was an orphan either way. So I was stuck in an orphanage until I got kicked out when I was 6. Hinata gasped, while Shino leaned forward in sudden interest. At the age of 6? It's probably because I had the Kyuubi in me. Bias and hate. After all, Ol 9 wasn't exactly a house pet when he blew half the village to hell. The villagers never liked me, and they made sure that I knew that every day for the past 14 years. But it was when I met Kurama at age 6 that things began to get interesting. Because it's the Kyuubi, not something as mere as that, Hinata-chan. It's because he became my first friend. I finally had someone looking out for me, so to speak. Things were fairly mellow for the first 2 years, but when I was 8, I got mobbed by the villagers, and it made me want to run away. It's the reason why I ran from the village towards Wave Country. You already know my family up there. Shino frowned visibly even behind his shades, even as Hinata was already struggling to keep her composure. I knew something was wrong, but something like this. Don't worry about it. I finally got a family out of it, so in hindsight, it was worth it. The trouble really brewed up when I returned to the village when I was 9.5. I guess I was hoping that things had quieted down. I was wrong. Things got really messed up. How messed up? Shino almost said as a challenge. Oh, you know, becoming some weird vigilante kid, taking care of Tenten when she was catatonic, founded the orphanage she lives in, learned better ninja skills from a veteran ninja, who may or may not be responsible for the deaths of my parents and the destruction of the village, nearly getting ripped apart by a lynch mob. Oh, and being pursued by the aforementioned veteran ninja who wants to steal my abilities. I think that's about it. He looked at his jaw-dropped teammates with a measured amount of amusement, knowing that he had effectively thrown them for a loop. Close your mouths before you catch flies. My past is a bit complicated, I know, but you can get more details later. Anyway, the reason I'm not too keen on trusting anyone isn't really your fault. I trust people really easily. Then why don't you trust us? Shino asked carefully, not wanting to offend him. It's not really you two. It's just that I don't really trust anyone in the Hidden Leaf that much. You're both a part of the lump package. Because of the hatred, Naruto's face fell into a grimace. The village is kinda rotten to me, but it's not only that, it's because I suspect the veteran ninja I was talking about is protected or being pursued by a law somehow or other. I know he's connected to important people in the village, and I can't even mention his name without Wing Anbu sanctioned by that law to pursue the perpetrator. The guy once told me his first name, and a dozen Anbu appeared out of literally nowhere. If they had seen my face at the time when I made my escape while he was killing most of them off, I would probably still be hunted by him. Quote, really? What's the name? Hinata asked curiously. Naruto glared at the girl, however, making her blush in embarrassment. Sorry, I didn't quite call that to mind. Naruto's glare softened. Alright, just think that through next time. Hinata nodded in response, and while doing so, recalled that Naruto had mentioned that he had abilities. Abilities? What kind of abilities? Naruto could tell that it was going to be a long afternoon. They had only just arrived at the tower after deciding to check their Oddseal holding time into the scoreboard. He was still tired after his exertions, but he knew that his teammates did deserve to get to know him a little better. After all, he had come to know them better, hadn't he? Alright, I'll tell you, but this doesn't leave this room. Whoa, boy, are you sure you want to tell them? You know what could happen if this gets out. Not even the Hokage knows. Kurama quipped in exclamation. I don't care. After all, he hasn't exactly been the most supportive over the years. He's probably hiding something about Ito, and if they're related in any way, the last thing I'd want is for them to be getting more intel on me. But you'd rather tell a couple of genins? I'd rather tell my friends, Naruto said out loud as he began to lift his headband. The remainder of the 2 days passed relatively quickly. During this time, the members of Team 8 all had a lot riding on their minds. To Naruto, he could tell that Hinata and Shino were still ruminating on he had told them shortly after they had arrived at the tower. It had been a lot to process, of that he was sure. While he couldn't say that he had had a completely tragic past, it did serve to make him more appreciative of all the few good things that happened to him, and of the precious people in his life. Speaking of which, what the hell was going on between him and Fu? As far as he was concerned, he had agreed to enter a relationship with Hinata before that. Kyuubi had ranted that he should get together with his servant, Haku, the very same that the beast had suspected had growing feelings for him. Even before that, Tenten had acted out of jealousy in Kimyo Town and confessed that she loved him, and now, Fu had kissed him. Honestly, he had no idea what to do, how to do it, or when. His mind was a complete muddle. Really? You're confused? The Kyuubi mumbled in astonishment before it turned into annoyance. You're one lucky son of a bitch, that's what you are. All you've been was to be plain old Naruto, and you've practically had them throw themselves at you. I guess being a nice guy actually does work. For a second, the Kyuubi was horrified at his admittance, before it turned nauseous. Oh Kami, I feel like I'm gonna vomit. Me? A nice guy? Depending on how you look at it, yes, you are. If I had to say that you had one thing in common, it's that you've helped every single one of these girls one way or other. You looked after Tenten when she was catatonic, you saved Fu from her crazy uncle, you helped Haku in Wave, and when you saved Hinata from the Kumo ninjas. Remember that? When you were 6, you know that I can hardly remember what transpires when we merge after we use the necklace. What about your clone in the village that taught her to you? Say medical ninjutsu while you were suspended? Hinata-chan didn't take it too well when I told her that I was hiding out and training close to Tokigakure. She's jealous of Fu, that's why. Anyway, what are you going to tell Hinata? You're dumping her for Fu? Naruto shook his head. That's kinda insensitive, even coming from you. But when I told Hinata about how Fu kissed me, you think she's mad at me because we didn't get to share our first kiss? Or is she mad at Fu-chan? Inside the seal, Kurama facepalmed himself at Naruto's ignorance, wondering how his container could be so smart and stupid at the same time. Before he could say anything more about it, however, a woman's voice started to speak over the PA system in all the rooms, including the break room, the mess hall that Naruto was in along with a few others. Alright, maggots, get to the battle showground in the middle of the tower. It's time to see whose time makes it into the top 10 ranks, and who gets to go home early. Naruto sighed to himself. Well, time to see how that goes. He got up out of his seat and filed out into the corridors, falling in line with everyone else as they headed towards the showground. Once there, everyone stood mixed together in a crowd as they looked towards the proctor of the phase they had only just passed. Some were a bit peeved to see Enko still looking so fresh in comparison to hell that they had only just gotten through, but it didn't pass Naruto's notice that the woman seemed to look at him in particular in the crowd of dozens. Strange, he mumbled to himself. Seeing him return her stare, Enko seemingly realized her social misstep and lessened her focus, letting her gaze fall over the entire crowd. I didn't grasp at first that this many of you were all still alive. Funny. I expected more of you to be painted across the forest. Congrats for not dying. What? An Omegakure Chunin hopeful muttered. Is this bitch for real? Oh yes, Enko shouted in response, having apparently heard him. This bitch is for very real. Now let's see how many of you tried your damnedest to survive this phase, only to fail. As I said before, only the top 10 ranking times qualify. So no more than 30 of you are passing this bit. Let's see. As if on cue to her words, the electronic screen board lit up to life and the 10 slots in it began to shuffle its digits as if to add intense drama to the moment. There were roughly 70 teams waiting to see if they had passed or not, and although most of them didn't have high hopes, they knew that the nature of the oddseals made it equally difficult for everyone in the exams for them to acquire, and to keep a hold of. Their combined times on a whole as a team made them hope, but almost all of those hopes were dashed as as the scoreboard stopped its digits for them to be read. 1. Konohagakure, Team 8, Naruto, Hinata, Shino, 30 hours, 28 minutes. 2. Takigakure, Team Ranger, Fu, Anna, Shiri, 16 hours, 9 minutes. 3. Konohagakure, Team 10, Choji, Shikamaru, Ino, 4 hours, 23 minutes. 4. Konohagakure, Team Guy, Neji, Tenten, Lee, 2 hours, 43 minutes. 5. Kumogakure, Team Samui, Omoi, Karui, 1 hour, 17 minutes. 6. Omegakure, Team Rakan, Daku, Inku, Kanjiru, 1 hour, 2 minutes. 7. Otogakure, Team Dosu, Zaku, Kin, 0 hours, 56 minutes. 8. Iwagakure, Team Demolitions, Kuritsuchi, Bakuden, Jishin, 0 hours, 48 minutes. 9. Sungakure, Team Suna, Konkuro, Tamari, Gaara, 0 hours, 43 minutes. 10. Konohagakure, Team Corman, Yoroi, Kabuto, Masumi, 0 hours, 19 minutes. Almost immediately, as the eyes scanned the board, most of the occupants fumed in disappointment and anger. In response to this, Enko only smirked. Of course, y'all maggots had to know that most of you wouldn't make the cut, hardly had she said this was Konkuro raising his hand as if calling for her attention. Yeah, Suna kid, what is it? I'm calling bullshit on this time rank. How are we ranked at 9 when we carried our seal for almost 4 days? The Mitarashi grinned. I explicitly said that you had to hold the seal. Camera footage shows that your raccoon-eyed teammate over there carried the seal in his sand. Your only saving grace is that you and the blondie took turns and held it for a total of 40+ minutes. You more than she, actually. Konkuro could hardly believe that their time spent in the forest almost went for naught, though he was GL. Add that they still managed to pass despite their blunder of over-relying on their younger brother for carrying the seal, he managed to notice something. You said that I carried it the most, not with St. Ending the fact that Gaara had it in his sand. Then, the list puts Temari's name after mine, and Gaara after hers. If that's not a coincidence, does that mean that the list is also ranking who literally pulled the most weight for each team? Quote, correct. By now, the remaining genins who had passed looked up at the list. Now, it was painfully obvious for each individual team when they thought about it. Naturally, they now had the idea of who was potentially the weakest link for each team, and who were the heavy hitters. Even in consideration of this, everyone had come to grasp that the team with the number 1 spot, namely the Uzumaki on that team, were the literal strongest and had loads of chakra to support a seal that drained chakra extremely intensively, even while they were fighting in the forest. In light of this, Naruto finally allowed a vestige of his former personality to leak through when he noticed that nearly everyone was staring at Team 8 and him in particular. That's right, he mumbled before his voice grew louder. You see that time gap? We're fucking awesome. A little secret, we were in the forest for only 3 days. There was a loud gasp in this revelation, but Tamari set her jawline. Your boast has no merit. We had ours for almost 4 days straight. In your hands? Naruto taunted. Seeing her stutter, he shrugged. Didn't think so. He was nearly chastised by his teammates to quit his boasting, but he shrugged it off. It helps to have a high influence. Besides, we weren't going to get underestimated anyway. Might as well make 'em think you're so tough that they don't even want to go against you. Omoi, who had overheard this, shook his head. I know I don't. You nearly killed the lot of us twice. Karui cuffed him twice over the head, basting him for telling their enemies damaging information. Well, that's that, Naruto said to himself. Now about that Tanuki kid over there, he's giving me the look. Oi, Gaara, what you looking at? He called to the Sabaku, making both his and the Suna Jinchuriki's teammates flinch. Something on my face? Naruto rubbed one of his cheeks. Did I get it? Gaara didn't reply, at least, not in words. He continued to glare at the blonde as if the Uzumaki were nothing but an idiot while his petering killing intent spiked. The pressure became so much so that everyone was immensely unnerved by it. Save for Naruto himself, who had trained to make himself immune to ki. He merely continued to grin stupidly at the Sabaku. Does anyone else feel that? Naruto said offhandedly. Kinda feels like someone wants to kill me. He slapped his cheek as if in sudden realization. Wait, that's you? You want to kill Whittle Olmi? Join the fucking line, pal, because there's a whole lot of people who's been waiting to do that before you. Keep your killing intent to yourself, 'cause you're not even worth getting the time of day from me. How to put this in a way you understand? Naruto pretended to hem and haw. You're not that important. The bad part of it was entirely believable. Everyone recognized that Naruto had spoken with candor. What was worse, however, was the fact that the Gaara was mumbling something about his existence, and looked nearly ready to commit murder then and there. Before the situation could devolve, Enko spoke up. Alright, that's enough out of you, Uzumaki. I don't want to hear any more lip from you, understood? As a reply, he turned to her and pretended to zip his mouth shut, then gave her the okay sign. Good, moving on. You're about to cut each other's throats anyway. So let's get right to it. It's time for you all to duke it out. Out of the 30 people still here, does anyone feel like they can't continue the exams? Injuries? Low chakra? Just general wussies? No one had expected that any of their numbers would leave, but it did happen. It was an entire Team Corpsman from Konoha who left without even giving a reason for their departure. Their sensei left as well, and that was that. However, it was somewhat interesting to Naruto as he realized that Kabuto was a part of that team, and he gave the bespectacled team the stink eye as he left. There's that guy who's been spilling information about what me and my team are capable of, huh? In a huff, Naruto paid them no more mind in favor of noting the fact that there was now 27 of the competitors left. A messy number, especially if there was going to be paired fights. He soon filed this information away for later, as Enko instructed them all that they were about to begin. Sure enough, the scoreboard's digits soon began to shuffle again as if in erasure, then began to reorder itself to file through the list of names until it came to a stop. Shino versus Daku. Whoa, the Omegaker Genin mumbled. So I get to fight the so-called awesome ninjas from Team 8, huh? He approached one of the standing positions of the showground while Shino moved to the other Everyone else was instructed to go up the sturdy catwalk that bordered the upper level. Both teams who had fighters now about to combat wished their members good luck, but Daku would have spat in SGUST had he not had on underwater breathing apparatus. I don't need that. Good luck with your match, Shino. Hinata called to the Aburame, who nodded. Naruto didn't call in the same fashion, and carrying out Enko's order to an unreasonable degree, kept quiet and only gave his teammate a thumbs up as he went up to the elevated walkway. Shino merely nodded in his own quiet way before he settled into his stance, not that there was much of one. Daku, on the other hand, withdrew a double-ended kunai that Naruto thought was rather unpractical. Naruto murmured. That AIM guy doesn't look like a heavy hitter. I wonder how he's gonna fight Shino. What you talking about? The sudden voice speaking into his ear startled the Uzumaki badly, making him jump. Turning to see the instigator, he smiled when he saw who it was. Fu-chan? Don't startle me like that. Fu grinned. What's the matter? Awesome-sama. Getting scared so easily? Anyone would be easily scared by you, he remarked carelessly. Seeing her about to punch him in the arm, he nearly leapt backward by several feet. Nope, nope, nope. I like my bones when they're not shattered, thank you very much. While he was conversing, the match had already begun, and Naruto pointed out that the Omegakure ninja was using a genjutsu. A genjutsu that makes the surroundings look pitch black to the victim? Well, if it's the genjutsu he's gonna use, then Shino's already won. Really? Fu asked in surprise. How come? His Kikaichu, they can help break him out of a weak genjutsu like that, and they'd just attack the AIM guy without even being told to. Besides, you shouldn't be worrying about Shino. You ought to be worrying about Hinata-chan. Hinata? Why'd I be worrying about her? The Taki Jinchuriki slowly turned to see Hinata glaring at her. You told her? Of course I told her. We were just starting our relationship, and you kissed me. Nuff said. Did you tell her that you enjoyed it? Fu asked coyly, making her fellow Jinchuriki sputter. I thought not. Makes you wonder, isn't Hinata-chan doing enough to make the relationship work? Hinata's fists clenched in anger whilst her face reddened. How dare you? Hinata fumed as she jabbed a finger at Fu. You're not even repentant. You did something to him. I knew something was off when I saw him fight off the Kumo team. You beguiled him. Certainly CA&T beguile somebody if some feelings didn't exist in the first place, Fu whispered in a taunt. It's obvious that he likes me more than you, and you're just trying to force a relationship that doesn't even have the right emotional basis. Fu leaned forward, almost in Hinata's face, and spoke so lowly that only the Hyuga heard her. Besides your little romance aside, you'd never be able to understand him the way I do. The stigma, the abuse and loneliness we've endured, the burdens we carry, you could never hope to emphasize with him because you're nothing more than a pampered, rich heiress in a large influential family. It's not your fault you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth. But that doesn't mean you can poach any guy you want. Whilst this was taking place, Naruto could watch as the girls were seemingly staring each other down as Fu was speaking in a hushed tone. Naruto couldn't quite make out what she was speaking, especially given his perspective of standing behind Fu. Wonder what they're talking about. Probably talking about your future, Kurama replied to the rhetorical question with a chuckle. Can't wait to see this fight turn into a four-way royale. Huh, what's going on? A new voice asked. Naruto was nearly as startled as he was the first time and swore under his breath before turning around. Well, what are Fu and Hinata doing? Shino, why the heck are you up here? Shouldn't you be fighting? Even more to Naruto's surprise, he could have sworn that he saw the Aburama give a shrug. I won a while ago. Why, you ask? It was a short fight. Naruto would have laughed if he weren't caught up in his own dramas. Before he could answer Shino, however, he heard the abrupt sound of a fist landing against flesh, and Fu was knocked backwards, almost landing in his arms. Who are you calling a poacher? Hinata yelled at the top of her lungs, unwittingly calling everyone's attention to herself if she hadn't already. You bitch, Fu grinned wistfully as she rubbed her red cheek, leaning up off of a befuddled Naruto. Talking with fists? That's more my style anyway. Before she could properly react, Junins now stood in their midst. Her own sensei was holding her back from Hinata while Kurenai was barring Hinata from continuing to assault the mint-haired Kunoichi. Huh, sensei? What's going on here? Kurenai demanded before her gaze fell on her blonde student. Oh Naruto, of course you're involved. Nani? Naruto cried. What's that supposed to mean? You know damn well what I mean. Already, the woman was already tongue-lashing the Uzumaki, who still hadn't a clue as to why he was being lectured. Looking for a way out, he spied his chance. Hey, look at the board. Who's fighting? I think it's saying that it's Fu-chan versus one of those AIM guys. In a mild surprise that she was getting to fight so soon, the girl leapt over the railing and down to the showground below. I'll be right back, she called out to him. Naruto's sweat dropped at this, wondering if she was taking her bout seriously. Her competitor was the exact same, and frowned deeply, trying to consider if the girl was supposedly the strongest on her team. After all, her name was at the forefront of the second team. But as soon as Enko yelled for the match to start, she dashed straight at him. All doubts fled and he rushed to start his ninjutsu. Before he could make his special clones, however, Fu finally caught up to him in less than a second and threw a wild haymaker at his chest, sending the unfortunate genin flying the entire distance of the showground to the far wall behind him. The wall behind him erupted into spider web cracks, but the ninja himself was left in far worse condition as his upper torso had been effectively smashed like glass. Most gasped in surprise at the girl's monstrous strength, even more so for having ended the match in literally 3 seconds. Holy shit, Omoi yelled before he threw up his hands in exasperation. You know what? I'm done. I'm done. I'll just do the exams next year. Before he could actually leave, Karui rapped him over the head and threatened him that he'd better stay if he really knew what was good for him. It was really easy. Fu called up to where Naruto and where the others were still standing and watching her. I just imagined that I was hitting your face, Hinata. Naruto's sweat drop grew even larger in the advent of this, and Kurenai's head nearly turned mechanically to glare daggers at him. Really? This has nothing to do with you at all? Hey, it's not as if I'm a walking clusterfuck waiting to happen. I don't even know why they're fighting. Shino shook his head. Yes you do, he deadpanned. Sell out, Naruto hissed. Anyway, that guy's okay. Fu went on to say as she looked at the aim ninja. I didn't draw out the match so that he'd suffer. In a humdrum, Enko checked the downed ninja's pulse and confirmed that he was still alive. He's still breathing, but he's gonna be stuck on tubes for the next half year. This is your idea of not making someone suffer? Enko grinned somewhat maniacally. I think I like you. Now get your ass out of the showground and join your team. After Fu left, the woman yelled for the medics, who hefted the badly hurt ninja away for medical attention. If all the fights go by quickly like this, I might be able to go home early. She mumbled under her breath. Shuffled the roster. That was that. Naruto made a mental note to never anger his fellow demon container. Apparently, everyone had come to the same thog. As they all gave her a wide berth as she passed them. A good while after she had passed and a new match started between a bomb-oriented ninja from Iwa and a heavily bandaged ninja from Otogakure. Uranai turned to Naruto and spoke more quietly. That's Fu, what is she to you? Fu-chan? Naruto asked to reaffirm, but it only made Kurenai scowl a bit when she perceived that he had used the affectionate suffix. She's a close friend of mine. If it's about how it looks like she's on a warpath against Hinata, I assure you, she's actually a nice person. That's probably true for you, Kurenai interrupted, but that girl was a literal juggernaut in the exams. If she had an odd seal from the start just like Team 8, her team might have been the ones with the top rank, instead of second place. I know that. She fought with the odd seal, Kurenai continued as she watched the fight below. She was even clubbing people around with it. But it's already known to most of the Junin sensei's in the village that you willingly fought a Kumo team to defend the objective before you gave the seal to her team. You willingly threw in the towel once you were sure that you had a good time rank. And basically ensured that an enemy team passed as well. You're accusing me of treason or something? Not really, but you're not looking too good. In fact, this whole situation doesn't look good. I am not talking about how she and Hinata don't get along. It's just that Fu fought Team 7. Of course, you noticed that none of the members are here? This said Naruto didn't even look around as he already knew the answer. Yeah, I realized. In fact, I would have imagined that they would have had a better chance than Ino Shikacho. Anyway, I already knew that she fought Team 7. Did she state her reasons? What happened to them? Naruto asked back, ignoring the woman's query. That was one thing he wasn't prepared to answer as yet. The woman realized that as well but paid it no mind. If anything, she could ask him later, seeing that he was uncomfortable about answering it in public. What happened to Team 7? If I had to describe it, it's as if they tangled with a rock slide or something. Kakashi's upset, and for good reason. It's not just because his team's out of the exams, but they suffered heavy casualties. How heavy? Kurenai took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. It was a particularly hard thing to report just how bad things were, and it wasn't easy to predict how he'd react. How he'd take the news, how he'd respond to how others behaved when they had found out all wildcards. As far as she was concerned, Kiba's leg is broken, along with more than just a few of his ribs cracked. He got off lucky. Sasuke, on the other hand, is in critical condition. His entire upper torso is a mess. Sakura, however, she passed on while she was in the hospital. She's dead. Naruto looked away sharply, his eyes briefly flashing his dojutsu, yet this was unknown to his sensei. Yuhi could see that he was affected by the news, but she couldn't tell how much. After all, news of a death affected people, no matter how well or poorly your association was with the deceased. They're around until someday, they're not. You simply stop seeing them in the places they belong, like an empty seat. If it's any consolation, deaths aren't uncommon in these exams. Nah, Naruto mumbled as he turned to look up at his sensei. What they got was only what was coming to them. And if Fu hadn't stopped them, who knows what would have happened to me? To you? Kurenai asked in suspicion. How does it concern you? Besides your sketchy relations to the tacky girl? Don't fret yourself about this too much. We're all feeling it. Sadly not as much given the fact that we have genin deaths all the time, I admit. But I'm telling you because there's footage of you and Fu associating in the forest. There's not much audio, and results of that would be some sort of inquiry to whether you wanted her to harm Team 7 or not. Hell, even now Kakashi is wondering if you might have hired her to hurt the team. Naruto muttered as he looked up at the woman. But Kakashi, why are you referring yourself in the third person? And did you ask Kurenai if you could henge like her just so that you could try to get answers from me? There were no words, only surprise. Kakashi, who still wore his transformation, could hardly fathom how the Uzumaki had perceived that he was in a henge. He didn't explain his reasons, he merely upped and shinned away in a retreat. But that wasn't the end of that. Naruto then approached the wall behind Hinata and apparently reached out to something that wasn't there. Yet, in response, his hand rested on some sort of invisible apparition, and the boy spoke clearly. Kurenai-sensei, drop the genjutsu, and kindly explain why the hell you allowed Kakashi to pull a stunt like that. Remarkably, said hitherto unnoticed genjutsu fell, and Kurenai was revealed leaning against the wall. Much to the surprise of those in proximity who had no idea that she was there. It was in our best interest. He basically wanted to find out why Fu harmed them specifically. It'd be a way to avoid having another topic to bring up at an inquiry, 'cause if it does go to the inquiry, it'll just be another lengthy topic which no one has time for. What inquiry? Naruto pressed. Given the fact that you just said that they got what was coming to them and that something was going to happen to you if Fu hadn't done anything to them, I guess this is going to the inquiry. What inquiry? Naruto asked again, although his tone got edgier. Am I going to trial or something? No, it's just that it's been decided by the Hokage that there are too many secrets floating about. It's not about this Fu girl, but I'd bet that it's going to be a side topic. I wouldn't bring it up, but Kakashi's liable too. And I can't defend you because I don't know Fu as well as you seem to know her. It's apparent that you do, and there's no reason that you should, and hardly any time frame or opportunity that you could have gotten to know her outside the village. There was going to be an inquiry anyway, no matter what you did and said just now. Well shit, I suppose that you had this coming, Kurama said. Eventually, all of your little secrets will come to light. Question is, will that bastard Ito come out of hiding if our secret's out? It might be a good thing and an opportunity to turn the tables on the Hokage once we've got the entire council's attention. If we're gonna take down the fucker, this inquiry might actually turn out great. We could even read some reactions to find out who's related to Ito, or even drop his name to see if those Enbu who are hunting after him will still show up. Too bad about the civilians though, am I right? I can't be bothered with a bunch of civvies trying to decide my life. If ninjas are there, I might be willing to acquiesce, but civilians would just be trying to make my life miserable. You could just sick Fu on them. That'd shut him up. Naruto sighed internally. We're done talking. At least watch the fights, then. I want to see what these runts are capable of. In answer to his request, Naruto averted his eyes to the showground where he could see the fighters. It was obvious to him that he had missed a fight or two previously because a few people were no longer in the fighting population. Even now, it looked as if a Kunoichi of Kumogakure was fighting against an Iwa genin, and the redhead ended up pinning the youth with her sword at his neck. Karui grinned in assurance of her victory. So, do I open up a new hole in your throat now, or? I yield, Jishin mumbled. The victory goes to Karui of Kumogakure, NKO announced while the two genins left the showground. Shuffled the roster. Most of the fights progressed like this, almost nearly blank to him. While his consciousness was still with him, his mind was elsewhere. Naruto was still trying to get his mind around the fact that there was going to be an inquiry already. He could see himself revealing the nature of his past, the relationship he had with the Kyuubi, what he was capable of. Where he had actually been during his suspension, the Tenacious 13. It went without being said that his little group was beginning to have a bit of notoriety. Of course, there had been sightings of them around the nations, and not always pleasant ones. It'd be foolish not to think that his so-called brothers hadn't been on espionages in other nations. trying to seek out the person who was behind the entire reason why he was an orphan and why Kurama was sealed inside him. He wanted answers. He wanted revenge. So too were his own doppelgangers, driven by the same outlook. And if it's one thing that Naruto dreaded, was the fact that all of his secrets would come to light, and Ito would only be able to glean information from it while still eluding the Uzumaki. What's the point of failing one factor, if he didn't win in the long run? Well, I think I speak for everyone when I say fuck this phase of the exams, Mitarashi said clearly as she watched another genin get carted away for medical attention. Fuck this phase. There are a few decent teams, I get that, but you can't have a strong team without strong members. For all those who haven't fought yet, if you continue, you had better know that you can bring your A game and realize that if you can't, you should just try again next year. To be honest, I'm getting tired of watching a non-fodder fight one another with kunais and 2-bit jutsus. I'm not saying to fight carelessly, but honestly, you guys would make pretty mediocre chunins even if you passed this year. That hurts, Fu's teammates complained. We really tried. I'm sure you did your best, you too, their sensei replied. Give thanks for life, and try again, like she said. You can't win all the time, but you show. Old train so that you don't lose all the time either. That's crappy advice, sensei, Anna grumbled. There's still quite a few people who haven't fought yet. Like Fu's boyfriend, he was a bit surprised. Said to see that she didn't fall for the bait, but that only raised more questions. So he is your boyfriend? Not yet, he's not. I'm working on it. I've been meaning to ask you about that, Fu, their sensei remarked. How are you so familiar with him? Oh, so now you're willing to ask into the welfare of this particular Jinchuriki, sensei? Don't be like that, Fu. Fine, I met him in the savannah behind Taki. Far out in the savannah. It was when I was running away. Notwithstanding the fact of how dangerous and stupid that was. Hey, you shouldn't be so trusting. He could have slit your neck from ear to ear. He could even have taken advantage of you. I trust that you know what I mean. Seeing that she was about to retort, he held up a hand to stop her. I know, he didn't do any of that. And maybe he never will. I'm saying that you should take better care of yourself. You mean I should be the treasure that Taki sees me as? The girl asked bitterly as she watched the roster begin to shuffle again. Just drop it. Who's next to fight? Tenten versus Kankuro. Alright, it's about time. A teen with an oddly painted face grunted as he walked down the stairs, whereas Tenten jumped down. Likewise, Tenten said with a grin. I was getting tired of waiting. Oh yeah? Well, the hospital's gonna suck for you. Alright, are the both of you ready? Anko looked at each of them as they got into position and nodded to her. Okay, good. Hajime. Hardly had she announced the beginning did she have to back up out of the way as Tenten promptly began to pull weapons from seals and hurling them at her opponent. Before Kankuro could make a quip about how useless it was, a bolus sling was thrown as well, the weighted lasso wrapping itself around him and the bundle on his back. Almost immediately, he nearly fell to the floor, and it was only pure luck why he was able to dodge the next few kunais that flew towards him. Come on, you're gonna stay all the way over there? Tenten taunted. Kankuro didn't get riled at the tease, instead settling for trying to think of a way to unhinge the puppet from his back and attack her with it. Must be a weapons user. If so, she's gotta run out of weapons eventually. Secretly, he manipulated Kurisu on his back to cut through the bolus that tied him up so that he could free his arms. Anyone can throw a kunai, girly, but not everyone can throw it as accurate. Kankuro merely shrugged as he seemingly checked himself for injuries that didn't exist. Last I checked, none have caught me yet. If that's all you can do, then you might as well give up. Just like the woman said, you're just fodder. Kick his ass, Tenten-chan. Naruto cheered from the balcony. His bolster wasn't taken in good stride. In fact, he was one of the last people that Tenten wanted to hear at that moment. Shut up, Naruto-kun. I'm still pissed at you. Tenten gritted her teeth as she unconsciously took a step closer, then another as neared to decrease the distance between her target and herself. It didn't improve her situation too well, although she noticed that Kankuro had less of an ability to dodge cleanly. Soon, she was within less than 10 feet, and kunais were more than just grazing the Suna shinobi. Had enough dancing, you prick? Drawing a katana from a seal, she dashed forward at him, and the fact that he smirked was apparently lost on her. She was intent on slashing him until he gave in, seeing that he was already nicked by enough kunais to handicap him from any sort of close-range action. But just before she reached him, bandages that wrapped up the bundle on his back suddenly came free as the Suna puppeteer burst into action. A rather monstrous-looking puppet flew off of his back, and at his behest, it engaged Tenten with one of its own blades, and easily countered her attacks. "You're no professional with that sword, and you're not getting laid with all that makeup on your face," Tenten bit out sourly. She hated being reminded that she was too much of a jack of all trades to be proficient at fighting with a specific weapon in her arsenal. In futility, she continued to hack away with her katana, one-handed while pulling out more throwing weapons from her seals to chuck them at the puppeteer. It was of no use, given the fact that he could easily fight the kunoichi with his puppet as well as avoid any direct attacks to himself by merely dodging. "Stay still, damn." In growing anger, she dropped her weapons to pull out a smoke bomb, which she then threw to detonate at her feet. The resultant dark plume of smoke concealed her and his puppet inside. Before Kankuro could even think of recalling his puppet or to still attempt at attacking the kunoichi in the smoke cover, the Higurashi fled from the smoke and darted at him with kunai in hand. "Faye, that bitch must have used the smoke just so that she could take me by surprise. Come on, let's see how that works out." Hardly had Tenten got close to the Suna nin did it become apparent that he was affected by a genjutsu or some sort of advanced henge. In fact, it wasn't even a he per se. Instead, as soon as the illusion dropped, it as revealed that Kankuro was actually the puppet, and vice versa. Like a nightmare, the puppet seemingly opened up and closed around the frightened weapons user like a nightmarish creature. Holy shit, Naruto boggled, unconsciously. His dojutsu flashed as he tried to think of the best ways to stop the match and save Tenten's life as quickly as possible. Just before he could, however, his eyes perceived the truth and he stopped. Never mind. Hinata, as well as Shino, who stood close to him, was confused as well as alarmed. A rarity, but Naruto didn't volunteer to ease the unasked question. Instead, they watched as fitted blades from the puppet's arms slammed in through its ports all the way to the hilt, seemingly murdering the girl inside. There was a bit of a hushed reaction at this from most of the Chunin hopefuls, who were expecting to see blood, but instead didn't. Finally, the smoke from Tenten's bomb finally cleared to reveal Kankuro, not Kurisu than originally thought, standing with a perplexed look on his face. What the hell, what are you staring at?" a voice asked into his ear. Before he could react, Tenten, who had never left the smoke as originally thought, pinned his neck in the crook of her arm and placed her kunai against his throat. "Oh, are you staring at my bunshin? You got tricked by an academy-level bunshin. Not only do you look like an idiot, but it turns out that you are one. Now say the magic words before we get to see some actual blood." Kankuro gritted his teeth in anger and disappointment in himself. "I yield." "Right," Anko called. "Winner." Tenten shuffled the roster. With that, the two fighters disjoined themselves from one another and went back to the balcony to rejoin their team. But just before they could part ways, however, Kankuro queried as to how she realized that he and his puppet had switched places. It was a bit of a nervous habit of his of asking for things he did wrong so that he could sort out his problem areas. One of the many things he did since he aspired to be an accomplished puppet master. It was a way of trying to get constructive criticism, and even Tenten realized this. It was thanks to her hardwired gift, of course, but she didn't want to divulge details about it to a complete stranger, especially not in a profession such as theirs. "It's nothing wrong with the illusion around you and the puppet. I just have a knack for realizing when something's off." Kankuro frowned. "Well, that was hardly informative." "Yeah, well, I'm a kunoichi, not a help service." With that said, Tenten finally retreated to the rest of her teammates, those of which stood not too far away from Naruto and the rest of Team 8. She got a reproachful stare from Neji instead of what she thought would be well-deserved congratulations and asked her teammate why he was glaring at her. "What's going on between you and Uzumaki?" "Nothing's going on that you need to concern yourself with." "Oh, but I do. Despite my own failure at beating Naruto at taijutsu, I admit, I certainly speak without any bias when I say that whatever friendship you have with him is beginning to get strained, and you inveigled Lee to tack him needlessly in the forest of death. It nearly cost us a ranking place to pass, seeing that he was unconscious for nearly 2 days. It's really nothing for you to stick your nose in, and if you think it's bothering the team on a whole, then it'd simply be yet another case in which you were wrong." Simple. Neji sighed, almost in a way that would depict him as rolling his eyes. So be it. His eyes glanced up to the roster which now read out 2 new names, and silently, he wondered if Kami himself was having a hand in creating the matchups. Well, let's see if you'll cheer for him to lose. He's going to fight Shikamaru. This should be interesting. Woo, go Shikamaru, Ino rallied, making her jaded teammate wince from her volume. Go win this one for Team 10. His sensei was encouraging him to just get it over with, even though for the first time, the man was actually doubting whether Shikamaru could win if he didn't just forfeit outright. I'm fighting Naruto? Fei, how troublesome. I have to fight him? Shikamaru didn't doubt his own abilities and his potential for reeling in victories by using his intelligence, but Naruto was hardly ever predictable. What was even worse, it was likely that Naruto had become even smarter over the course of time for Kami's sakes. He'd solved a decades-old murder spree in Kimyo Town, something that had even the Nara himself stumped. He didn't have high hopes. Whereas Naruto leapt down into the fighting ground, Shikamaru purposefully made his way down the catwalk slowly and took the stairs, using the time to try to think of a strategy that he could use against the Uzumaki. To his growing disappointment, he realized that he'd used up all of his flash-oriented bomb seals in the Forest of Death, which meant that he couldn't use a sort of artificial light of his own design in this particular fight. He would have liked to throw one of these particular bombs behind his opponent to create a shadow towards he himself and tether their shadows with his Kujumain no Jutsu. But he was shit out of luck. Oi, quit dragging your feet, Shikamaru. Let's get this done and over with, Naruto shouted goofily. Under his breath, Shikamaru Mew. MB led something heated about troublesome blondes, and got into position. What's the hurry? You know that you're going to lose, Naruto. From high up on the catwalk behind him, Ino and Choji cheered him on. And it did give him a bit of influence. But the bluster was still too weak. Trying to psych me out, Shikamaru? That's not your style. Alright, that's enough out of you too, Enko chastised. Are the both of you ready? Always ready, Naruto riposted. Kick that pineapple head's ass. Fu called out from where she was with her team. This only served to make Enko internally upset, since her hairstyle was vaguely similar to that particular fashion, and ordered the mint-headed girl to shut up. Shikamaru only sighed deeply at all the shenanigans and prepared himself for what would be the fight of his life, or so his melodrama would indicate. Enko then proceeded to ask the Nara if he was ready, and he regretfully answered that he was as he settled into a stance in which he would execute his jutsu as quickly as possible. While doing so, however, he saw Naruto, if for the shortest second, glanced upwards. Okay, fighters, Hajime, I forfeit, Shikamaru said lamely. What? Anne. Ko was completely stumped as she stared at the boy. You forfeit? Everywhere else, everyone, so to speak, was in an uproar about the Nara's decision to give up without even putting up a fight at least. Even more to Shikamaru's chagrin, Ino was screaming at him to fight, despite her sensei's attempts at trying to bring her down from her emotional high. To everyone, however, it was clear that a few people in particular had expected him to do this, and Naruto himself was included in that small number. No matter that, he still tried to play it off. Come on, Shikamaru, you might win, you know. Anything can happen. Sure, Naruto, whatever you say. You know what? Why don't you stop talking bullshit, huh? You know why I'm forfeiting. I saw you look up. Naruto tried his best to keep a grin from forming on his face, and it was a failing process. How come, however, he was only repaid with the Nara's silence as he turned to go back up to the catwalk. Alright, fine, I know why. I was gonna sabotage the lights. How the hell's that relevant? Enko demanded. And that's if you even could? He's a Nara, ma'am. There's no such thing as a shadow existing without light, so he couldn't enhance his Kujumain that way. Secondly, he's just not that adept at fighting without being able to see, even if he wanted to use his Kujumain in the dark. Oh, I see you're a know-it-all. You wanted to know, but I'm kinda pissed I didn't get to fight. Yeah? Enko asked with an air of boredom. Suck it up, 'cause I am too. Winner, Uzumaki Naruto. There were no cheers or anything of the sort for him, but he had expected as much. With a purposeless walk, he went back to rejoin his team, and he found that he couldn't even look them in the face. I didn't even get to fight, damn. You're really upset? Hinata asked in surprise. If anything, she would have thought he would be relieved. Even then, she had to fight Kintsuchi from Odo, and although she could easily see through her illusions and beat her quite handily, she would have preferred not to fight at all. I would have thought that you considered yourself fortunate. Naruto loves fighting, Kurenai said matter-of-factly. Although I myself am glad that you all won. Plus getting to be able to see you're all unhurt while doing so. Easy wins. Team 8, they don't come along very often. That's not what you're focused on, Naruto reproached. You're just glad that I didn't wreck the place. But don't worry, I'll still get to fight. Don't worry, you've won already, so I'm not getting what you're talking about. You mean the finals, right? Nope, I'm gonna fight in these prelims. Don't worry, sensei, Naruto reassured with a boastful air as he pointed at himself with his thumb. You'll get to see me kick ass up close. Now, who's fighting next? Naruto looked at the shuffled roster to see the names of the next pair of combatants and heaved a lengthy exhale. Wow, Ino is gonna fight that Suna chick. How is this gonna play out? I think we both know what's gonna happen, Naruto. Look at that girl with the fan. Everything about her screams, long-ranged widespread futon. From where I'm standing, it's already hard to tell if that awesome student been eating properly, much less training hard. It went without saying that Ino was resolute in winning her match, despite it already a foregone conclusion in everyone's minds that she was going to lose. It was rather tiring to know that she was constantly being classed as a fangirl. She had realized that quite a while ago, and to be honest, she was tired of all the damn noise. Without even a word, she got into position across from her competitor and stood in what she actually hoped was a decent enough stance. What, no banter? Anko asked rhetorically. Thank Kami. The GHT between Temari of Suna and Ino will now begin. Hajime. Unsurprisingly, instead of toying with Ino, Temari unfolded her fan and unleashed a powerful gust of wind at Ino, who immediately went on the evasive. It was a bit uncharacteristic of her, but she only sought to end the match as quickly as possible, seeing that her opponent looked the part of kunoichis who tended to die young. There was no need in drawing the match out for long. The others could only watch as Temari unleashed gales of chakra-enhanced wind as if they were free, forcing Ino to keep moving if she valued her health. She had already noticed that the wind had a sharp affinity to it, slashing their way even into the solid concrete behind her. You think you can outrun the wind? Temari jeered. Futon. Kamedachi no Jutsu. Wind release. Wind scythe technique. Swinging her fan for what she hoped was the last time, Temari released a prevailing vortex at the platinum blonde, forcing the Yamanaka to dive out of the way. Unfortunately, up until now, her angle had been too terrible to execute her Shintenshin no Jutsu. Mind transfer technique. The problem was that if she stood still for even a second, she was going to get cut up already. Most of her hair that streamed behind her when she dodged most the glancing attacks had gotten cut off. There had been some close shaves, pun not intended. Damn, how I can see. Watch her in my jutsu without ending up looking like carved meat? The point was, she can't. Should she just call the match as a forfeit? She didn't want to be like Shikamaru, but if one thing could be said about him, it was that he was in one piece. She might end up envying him for that before this fight was over. If it could be called a fight, that is. Getting fed up, Temari prepped herself for yet another one of her wind techniques. But instead of swinging the fan directly at Ino, she herself spun as if on an axis before executing her technique, sending her strongest vortex yet that slammed into Ino from the side and pummeled her into the wall. Everyone winced when they heard the sound of bones breaking very audibly. Ooh, Naruto uttered as he flinched. That sounded painful. She's probably done. She's a fangirl. That's what. It was coming to her. All those Uchiha fangirls are getting what was coming to them. That doesn't mean that Sakura deserved to die. Kyuubi. The Nine-Tail. Ed Fox grumbled to himself about his title before reminding Naruto that it wasn't his name. Look, I'm sorry, but to Kami be the glory. Why the hell did you have to say that? You don't know what any of these Uchiha loyalists would have done to you if he had told them to off you. Besides, people probably die a lot in these exams anyway, so you can go blame that Hitaki fucker for enrolling an underprepared team. Nothing could have prepared them for Fu. I'm not mad at her, it's just that I basically grew up with Sakura. We're not friends or associates, but we know each other. You really think the team would have done anything to me? Chit-chat later. It looks like something's happening. Indeed, Ino had collapsed to the ground while facing Temari, her arms outstretched in a queer position towards the Suna Kunoichi. Temari had probably assumed that she had already won and was waiting on the proctor to call the match, but failed to realize that Ino hadn't quite lost the fight as yet. Shintenshin no Jutsu, Ino whispered. Just before her mind fled from her. Naruto gawked at the kunoichis down at the showground, wondering if Ino had actually successfully executed her technique. However, nothing could have prepared her for Temari's next actions, as the teen screamed at the top of her lungs, and her voice had an obvious distortion to it. "Get the fuck out of my body. Already, she Ad pulled out a kunai out of her pouch and was stabbing herself repeatedly in the arms and legs, of her own accord and at the same time, against her will. "You bitch." She was already straining against herself, but on the inside, Ino was already suffering from Temari's self-hurt in an attempt to drive her out of her consciousness. "You're my bitch, and you're getting mind-fucked." Ino, Temari yelled, through clenched teeth as both tried to gain control over the other. "Proctor, scream Temari, forfeit." An eerie silence fell as everyone stared at the now bloodied Temari as she collapsed to her knees as Ino's mind finally came back to rest in its rightful host. At last, Naruto broke the quiet with a casual remark. "Damn, I guess a broken watch can be right twice a day, am I right? I did not see that coming." A killer kunoichi got beaten by a fangirl, Anko muttered under her breath, well aware that everyone was more or less thinking the same thing. "Oh well, infinity is a pretty big fucking number, so I guess even that was possible. Maybe she was underestimated, maybe she got lucky, doesn't matter." The Mitarashi silently watched as one of the blondes had to be carried away to the infirmary for severe bodily injuries while the other was escorted away in order for her self-inflicted wounds to be patched up. "Guess that's how the chips flew this time," shuffled the roster. There was a small chatter that rose in the wake of this. There were 5 people who hadn't yet fought, and everyone knew who they were. To make matters even more interesting, these people all knew themselves. And they were aware that a member of their little group was Gaara himself. They were all ninjas, all trained to some extent and knew that death would come in their profession, yet they were all till put off by the feeling of bloodlust that he was still emanating. Whether they knew that he was a Jinchuriki or not was irrelevant. They just knew that he was simply not like them, and chances were that they'd probably regret fighting him. But if his teammates could be fooled by cheap tricks and outmatched by a lucky, contemptible-looking kunoichi, then chances were that he was mostly bark, right? Maybe what they were talking about how he carried the seal was just a lie, and they weren't taking it fairly easy in the forest of death, that they had to struggle like everyone else. Choji in particular hoped that this was true. He hoped even more that he wouldn't be the unlucky person who had to fight him. Shikamaru claimed to have seen him kill people in his sand while he had been guarding both him and Ino when they fell unconscious on the first day. And to see Shikamaru being that disheveled frightened him. The Akamichi, suffice to say, was wearing his emotions like a shirt. Those in proximity to him could see that he was worried. "Well Choji, I guess it's all on you now, Asuma had noticed that his student was getting nervous, and patted him on the back. "Take it easy, there's an odd number of you left. You might not even have to fight, and you get a bye straight to the finals." "I can't even say that I wish I was that lucky," Shikamaru said in a bored tone, "'cause that's just more fighting in the end that I can't be bothered with." "Would it kill you to give a damn, Shika?" his sensei chided, "to at least try to fight, like Ino?" She knew that she was, as quickly as he could. Asuma searched for the right word to describe Ino without sounding insulting. She knew that she was at a disadvantage, but she still fought and she won. "Do you know what a blue moon is, sensei? It's when there's a full moon twice in 1 month. And it looks bluish. It's also pretty rare. Do you understand what I mean?" Even Choji understood what he meant. He was saying that Ino got extremely lucky. Once Sarutobi grasped that, he grabbed Choji's shoulder and tried to raise his spirits. "There are 4 people. There's a 25% chance that you could fight Gaara, and another 50% that you would have to fight someone else, and another 25% that you won't even fight at all. Be realistic, sensei. Even if he doesn't fight Gaara now and he goes to the finals, they'd still have to fight one another if they kept winning their bouts. If I won, Choji and I would even have to fight each other. These exams are just too troublesome. But you haven't won," Asuma reminded sternly, "and you've got no place in this discussion. Methinks I'll let a certain woman know that her son couldn't even bring himself to make an effort to fight in the prelims." Shikamaru's eyes widened. "You wouldn't." "I would. Now quit acting like a smartass and help encourage your teammate." Asuma paused as he looked up at the fighting roster to see the names. "Oh, Kuretsuchi versus Zaku. Well, Choji wasn't fighting Gaara, At the very least, not yet, as there was still a chance that he wouldn't have to fight at all. The boy's odds were changed, and not exactly for the better. He himself knew who and what Gaara was, and he wasn't exactly willing to allow Choji to fight the raccoon-eyed youth. He could well imagine that Kakashi was by the memorial stone again by T's time after finding out that he'd lost a student of his in the exams. Why did any of them allow their youngsters to join this year's exams? Was it to get something as petty as winnings from a gambling pot? Bragging rights that they had the best students? To show off what they were capable of? This certainly did not become the case. They had all seen the camera footage of the exams. Throughout it all, Maeda Guy was the one who, ironically, was the most taciturn and reserved. It was as if he had expected their reactions, their surprises, their guilts and their regrets. Especially that of Hai's rivals when he saw that his team had gotten badly hurt and worse. The Chunin exams were no joke, yet, they as seasoned Junins had allowed their green genins to take part in a predominantly cruel exam despite knowing what it was like. Even Ino, Asuma thought grimly, he couldn't say that he felt pride in seeing that she was going to the finals. The prelims consisted of matches in a controlled environment. If Tamari and Ino were legitimately fighting as enemies, Tamari would have shredded the girl from the get-go, or Ino would have, hopefully, taken her by surprise and did whatever she wanted to her if she actually had the stomach to. She didn't, and she still basically hadn't. He'd seen it before. Ninjas getting comfortable with only one particular jutsu and not even trying to master it or trying to learn additional ones. Ino was still far more disappointing than Shikamaru had been in terms of actual performance, and had only won at the expense of what bones that wouldn't heal by the date of the finals. She'd sacrificed her own body just to use her jutsu, and that wasn't beneficial to anyone, least of all her. With all these things in mind, what was he supposed to tell Choji? "You've sent unrefined students to an unforgiving classroom," Guy said strangely, "just to flaunt your pride? That's nothing to be proud about, that's most unyouthful. You could have held them back a year. We have an advantage on home turf, and we won't have that for another few years." Kurenai had answered him. "Home?" Guy said in his same uncharacteristic tone. "I'm willing to bet that he never even heard of Training Ground 44 before, and you're willing to call it home turf, even without considering the exam's nature?" Asuma frowned. Guy had been right. "Choji, I'm dropping you out of the exams." "No, I'm not dropping out." Instantly, both Shikamaru and Asuma both turned to stare at Choji as if he'd grown a second head. They didn't ask him why he wanted to fight. Maybe he was being brave. Maybe it was pride, or even stupidity. It could even be because he wanted to see if he could muster a win like his fellow teammate. They didn't know, and what made it worse was that not even Choji himself knew why. Far below him in the ring, two fighters knew not what the rotund boy was going through, nor did they care. The girl of the two, that being Kuretsuchi, had her own things to worry about. Notwithstanding the fact that there was an Oto ninja with tubes in his arms and trying to blow her away. Better wrap this up quick or this is gonna look like the fight between the two blondes. In an experiment, Kuretsuchi ran in a half circle to dodge the massive blasts of wind while throwing 3 kunai as hard as she could at her opponent, trying to see if he would focus on kunais, which would buy her time to devise a workaround jutsu, or if he would allow himself to get injured by them just to ensure she didn't get the drop on him. Instead, Zaku merely angled one of Hai's arms to blow away the kunais while still focusing his other arm on her. "TCH, that all you got, cunt?" she whispered under her breath, before Zaku's wind blast began noticeably rising in pitch. The yell of his jutsu was subsequently lost in the noise, and the blasts of wind became so powerful that it was actually visible due to the chakra laced in it. Thinking quickly, she performed a doryuhei ki and created a mud wall that slanted in accordance to the wind, allowing it to slope off. Damn, shouldn't he have run out of chakra by now? Suddenly feeling a stinging sensation, she looked down her palm to see that the deep cut in it had reopened. She stared intensely at the bleeding wound, recalling how she'd incurred it when fighting Naruto for the first Oddseal she had encountered. That what was a bastard, a child born out of wedlock? He had to be one Naruto Uzumaki? She had read Kami knows how many history books and had seen pictures of the Yondaime in his youth, right up until his death. Didn't the brat know who he was? Or was it possible that he actually wasn't? He had to know if he was. She could see that he was the Yondaime's son, it practically written all over his face. As her hand continued to bleed, She happened to look up, only to meet the Uzumaki's eyes as he gazed at her. I bet he's wondering, how's she gonna get out of this one, huh? The girl mused to herself. What am I gonna do when we fight each other in the finals? Just like that, she was brought back to the present and realized that she still had to win her prelim match first. Using a little chakra, she kneaded a tiny amount of quicklime in her mouth and spat it onto her cut, watching it harden and stop the bleeding. It stung at first, but it soon ceased. She flexed her finger to test if she could still move her fingers. Alright, guess the dumb windstorm's done. Time to go leave my footprint all over his ass. Leaping out from behind her cover, her hands went through the hand seals as best as she could. Performing her jutsu, Doden, Doryuso, Earth Release, Earth Flow Spears. In an instant, a spear made entirely out of the rock of the arena sprang out of the ground and into her waiting hand. And she rushed Zaku while readying a genjutsu. As soon as she was close enough, she hurled the spear at him, knowing that its weight and aerodynamics would ensure that it would cut through any wind he could blast out of the tubes in his arms. To Zaku himself, however, there seemed to be even more spears breaking out of the walls and ground close to him. In the heat of the moment, he was forced to try something new in an effort to save himself, as he did not know which aspect of the jutsus would hurt him. Using the wind discharges from the tubes in his arms and aiming them behind him, he made a hasty retreat and dashed away at a heightened speed. Shit, Kuretsuchi had no idea that he could do that, and now the Oto ninja was speeding around the arena, using his arms to help him steer. Speed up or slow down when necessary. She realized that she could still follow him with her eyes, and tried to use another genjutsu of earth flow spears, deciding that it would be a more efficient use of her nearing low chakra. It still turned out to be a pointless waste, as Zaku noticed the foreign chakra in his system and in a bid to disallow himself from falling victim to another genjutsu, bit his lower lip until it bled. He was about to execute another attempt at a Zankaha to pummel her, but delayed the action to think it through for a bit. He knew that whatever she couldn't dodge, she could probably just create another improvised slowing shelter to duck behind. He needed to force her to the point that she needed to create another one of these shelters, before annihilating both the shelter and she along with it with his jutsu's stronger variant. Sure, it'd tax the hell out of his chakra, but he needed to end the match before he became too exhausted. HMPH. This bitch is just gonna dodge, huh? Alright then keep dodging. Zankaha. Yet again, he produced another great audible wind blast from both of his arms, but this time, instead of aiming directly at the kunoichi, he aimed his arms to both of her sides, and brought his arms to meet each other at the center to pen her in. Just as he predicted, she created another sloping mud wall to take cover refuge behind, not even realizing that she was trapping herself in her opponent's target. Pity, she ain't even know that I can blast through rock with this next jutsu. I was hoping to save this trump card for later, but I guess shit just happens. Still hiding behind her improvised cover to avoid being blasted into mush, the team from Iowa was fuming to herself, cursing internally at the fact that he still needed a way to beat the guy whose jutsu seemed to have every range advantage in the showground. With a sigh, she prepared herself to weather the boy's jutsu once more, when she suddenly got the feeling of intense paranoia. A feeling that someone was staring at her. Following it, she looked up and noticed that the damned Namikaze brat seemed to be shaking his head. They were at a great distance from each other, yet she could tell that he was subtly shaking his head. What? He disapproved of her? Disapproved of her actions? Since when did he care? No. Since when did she care? Certainly not before when she met him. She seethed internally, and it certainly wasn't when he sliced into her hand in the forest of death. Looking down at her palm again, she saw that the quicklime on it was streaked, doing a good job of stopping the bleeding. Yet after making this observation, she looked up at him again, and once again noticed that he was still, ever so slightly, shaking his head. For some reason, she took it as a warning. To additionally give her cause for alarm, she heard the dim roar from the boy's jutsu die down as he prepared to blast her location. All of the sound disappeared from He technique as he resorted to pure pummeling force instead of edged properties, and it was obvious to everyone in the building that something was going to happen. Finally, Kuretsuchi grasped what the Uzumaki was doing. It was a warning that she shouldn't stay where she was. Oh, shit, Zankakyokua, extreme decapitating airwaves. As announced, far more powerful version of his original jutsu rocketed out of arms. and blew the showground halfway to oblivion. In fact, the blast was so powerful that it was clearly visible and streaked with white chakra as it pulverized its way through the surrounding area into rubble, even including the Iwa Nin's shelter. With a yell of glee, Zaku began to celebrate that he'd won, given the fact that even if his opponent was still alive, she was sure to be badly injured. "She's done now, yeah?" Zaku asked to Anko, who was still staring at the badly damaged showground, wondering if she had made a mistake by opting to be a proctor of the Chunin exams. "You gonna call the match?" Anko shook her head. "No confirmation on that. The match is still in progress." "Kuso," the team muttered as he looked around intently. He kept on his guard, though, not underestimating his opponent like Tamari had done. The ground crumbled beneath his feet and without any warning, the boy dropped into pit trap full of quicklime. He already had to try to tread IT's surface just to ensure he didn't sink in it, and the horribly viscous solution was almost enough to subdue him, even though it only came up to his shoulders. "Damn, bitch," Zaku cursed bitterly or grasping at the sides to pull himself out. "What the fuck is that stuff?" Kuretsuchi partially revealed herself from below the ground, having had escaped the boy's destructive jutsu by using a aka Hira, underground projection. "You just took a bath in cement, just add water." Already going through hand seals, she performed her next jutsu as an unpredicted water technique, and spewed water all over the unfortunate Oto ninja. "Well, that's that," Kuretsuchi muttered as she finally finished pulling herself out of the ground while watching the team trying to resist the hardening of the quick climb and ultimately failing. His last movement only allowed him to point his right arm at her, poised like a statue. She didn't pay much attention to him, though. Instead, she only looked down at the cut in the palm of her hand that was still sealed by quicklime, marveling that she still hadn't shed any more blood. "My Kekai Genkei's pretty useful. I'm gonna blow you away." Kuretsuchi was no genius, that she knew. In that same line, she wondered if the Oto ninja was actually retarded. "Oi, you lost. And you can't use your jutsu anymore 'cause the quicklimes is clogging your Zenkaha." Hardly had he announced his technique did his jutsu backfire in his arm, and blew clean in off at the elbow in a mist of blood, spraying every which way. Everyone only stared on as the youth screamed in shock and pain. But Kuretsuchi was fairly calm throughout. "Medic," she called. Looking back at the proctor, she made a small gesture as if to remind the woman that she needed to call the match, and so she did, announcing the Iwa teen as the victor. In that same state of mind, she went back to join her team back up on the balcony, and on her way, she was about to pass Naruto, but she noticeably hesitated and paused. This got Team 8's attention, and Naruto's own in particular, wondering what the girl was about to do. "Yeah, need something?" Instead of immediately answering, she only looked down at the sealed cut in her palm yet again before up again at the blonde. "Thanks," she said coolly, before stepping past him. "But I'm still gonna kill you one of these days." "Oh yeah?" Naruto called after her. "As I said before, join the damn line." Turning back to his teammates, the boy could only shrug. "I guess I've got a rival now. Interesting." Kurenai shot him a look as if to say, "Really?" And it was a hint he noticed. "I cut her hand when we were fighting in the forest. She probably got the idea to win the match by using the quicklime in the same way she stopped her bleeding." "Is that all?" Kurenai looked back at the retreating figure of the kunoichi and back again at her student. "Seems like she has it in for you. Don't you know why?" Naruto studied the woman. "I can tell that you know why. By at least 5 different body actions and speech, and you're asking me as if to test me to see if I know. Let's just say that I'm no dunce. I didn't lapse into a coma for no reason at all." She didn't quite understand this, nor did she want to dare to call it to see if it was a bluff. "I don't get you, Uzumaki Naruto, and I may never will. I wish I could understand me too. Anyway, I guess they're going to take an intermission to fix the ground in the arena. They're probably gonna get an earth release expert to repave it. Anyone got an idea for a way to pass the time? You wanna explain how you lapsed into a coma?" Kurenai queried. "I can when the inquiry comes. You're gonna have to wait like everyone else. And just so you know, I blame you for allowing this inquiry thing to happen." "If you must know," Kurenai replied quietly, "your servant or slave or whatever she is, she's to blame for this inquiry happening. So don't blame me for this hole you fell in. Haku-chan, she's a servant by choice." The Uzumaki added the last hastily. "And if she helped cause this? Shit, Haku-chan, what are you doing?" He asked himself. It was a matter that was beginning to trouble him greatly. He had little advantages to be had, and a lot of disadvantages. What could Haku possibly hope to have happened by inveigling something like this? He thought he knew her well. No, he did know her well. They now shared something more than just a master-servant bond, and he knew that she was already extremely dedicated and loyal to him, despite having only becoming his for a short while. She obviously did this for his benefit now. She believed that this would be for his benefit, and she herself was unaware that he still had secrets he wanted to keep hidden, at least for a while longer. That would mean that she found something she wanted to be revealed, not knowing that this would cost him other secrets that could be revealed as well. But just what did she discover? Maybe it has something to do with that damned riddle Kurama offered. The one about a picture and looking over the village. I already searched the hell out of the Hokage monument for anything out of the ordinary. If it really had to do with the Yondaime, there's nothing up there. Still, I wonder why I get mentally controlled to do what I did on the last day of my coma. Nah, brat, think. It probably has to do with your birthday. And maybe this mind control junk you went through on that day was just a coincidence that helped you to wake up. The fourth is connected to me. He's my father, or at least my relative, right? But you said that you didn't know, and that you didn't think so, Naruto asked. That's right, I don't think he was your father, Kurama lied. But it's clear he's got something to do with this. I'm willing to bet that he has something to do with that seal on your forehead, or that necklace you've had since you were born. Naruto his head in response to this, and frowned in his perplexed state. He somehow got the feeling that he was being baited away from the initial point, but he ignored it. He had no reason to doubt the Kyuubi. He was his oldest friend and lived inside him since birth. If he couldn't trust the Biju, then who could he trust? Yeah, probably. Who knows? But whatever this seal is, it's responsible for giving me powers that Ito wants. He's a hog for power, and as you said, you have reason to believe that he's the one responsible for the death of my parents. I'm gonna kill him for that. As I said before, he's responsible for me raising the village. He used a fucking Sharingan he stole, and controlled me to make me go berserk. Then it's his fault, Naruto whispered. It's not your fault if you didn't know what you were doing. While you were leveling the village, you probably knocked over a building with my parents inside and didn't even realize it. He's responsible for me being alone for so long. For the reason why I have to bear you as a curse. I thought we were friends, brat. Oh sure, Naruto said aloud in a sarcastic tone. You're my favorite curse. Looking up, he realized that the showground had been repaired and realized that he'd zoned out while it was being done. Guess, focus, kept me focused on my thoughts, am I right? Who cares? Look at the roster. It's probably already been shuffled. Excuse me, Naruto. Naruto looked up to see Choji before realizing that he was in his way. Oh, sorry. He allowed him to pass, and as the Akamichi was passing him, Naruto noticed that the boy's eyes were downcast. Shit, what happened to him? Glancing back up at the roster, Naruto shook his head. Oh, that's why. Choji versus Gaara. Look at him. I guess that he knows that Gaara's a guy you shouldn't mess with. But even so, why's he fighting him? And why isn't anyone stopping him from throwing away his life? Even his Junin should know that the Tanuki kid is off his rocker. The Aikibi tends to drive the hosties resides in completely insane. Maybe I should do something? Naruto asked hastily. All the Kyuubi did was snort in laughter. What? Choji's a friend? Let him throw away his life if he wants. But at least cheer for him. Maybe that's all he really needs, just a morale booster. He might actually pull a win out of his ass like his teammate. With a sigh, Naruto granted that his inner beast had a point and acquiesced. Losing his misgivings, he, however, hoped that if and when things were going awry that Choji would forfeit the match. For those who knew of Gaara's abilities and had any sympathies to Choji, they also shared the same hope, but it was fleeting as Enko got ready to start the match. Are you both ready? The Mitarashi asked, looking from one to the other, then vice versa. Gaara, are you ready? Seeing the boy nod subtly, she then turned to the rotund fighter. Choji, are you ready? No one missed the emphasis. Obviously, she also thought that the match was going to be a one-sided slaughter. And the Choji felt his internal anger rise. Shut up, he muttered under his breath. Speak up, I can't hear you. Oh, she heard him. She heard him, whether she thought he was just lashing out because of his miserable luck wasn't the main issue. She merely wanted to see if he had the stones to repeat himself. The boy hesitated before answering. I'm ready. Choji said clearly. Anko nodded tersely. Okay. She stepped back out of the way, and flagged her arm down. Hajime. With that, the match had begun, yet none of the fighters moved a step out of their places as they stared at one another as if they, with what could easily be called a, what the hell not, shrug. Choji formed the ram seal to draw on his chakra, thus making it simpler for him to execute his next technique. Before he did, however, he decided that he should start to go all out, lest he fail because he performed at less than his potential. To do so, the boy took out a triple case out of his pocket and ate a green spinach pill that was inside. That should give me more power. Baika no Jutsu, expansion technique. In an instant, the boy's plump appearance was now 10 times what it was before. Then 20 times because of his pill, before he altered himself into starting stance. He hesitated for a moment, watching as Gaara pulled the cork out of his gourd, sand beginning to flow out. Gritting his teeth in realization that the match was now in full swing and there was no turning back, he charged forward in a roll while his limbs receded into his body. Nikuden Sensha, human bullet tank. The rolling youth was a dynamic in physics, and pure mass in motion. Gathering speed and force, he smashed himself as hard as he could where he knew Gaara to be. Instead of impacting the Suna Jinchuriki, however, a solid wall of sand stopped the Akamichi in his tracks instantly. His speed was brought to zero so fast that it disoriented him and due to this, accidentally allowed the sand to start covering his body. Oh, shish, he tried rolling away, but found that he could not. There were distorted shouts warning to move. Choji was already thinking that he had already lost the match and it wasn't even a few minutes in, but he soon realized that he was still intact. That is, not crushed to a bloody mess all over the floor as Shikamaru had warned him could happen. What I see now. That was how getting crushed normally worked. There needed to be a greater amount of force and mass in order to decimate something of lesser quantity. Wait, I'm too big? Choji asked aloud. Correction. Naruto shouted from the balcony. You're too fahmph. Hinata had clamped her hand over her crush's mouth and silenced him just in time before he yelled out the boy's trigger word. However, Choji still comprehended what his fellow genin was trying to say and instead of getting angry, actually found it in himself to chuckle. He soon started trying to roll again, and began to gather speed once more. Straining against the wall of sand, there soon arose a horrible screeching sound, making Naruto shake his head as soon as Hinata's hand dropped. What is this? The battle of defenses. I can still do this. The Akamichi yelled in his mind. If I keep rolling, it'll displace all the sand and I'll get him. That's if he stays in one place. That was one, if too many. While Gaara's sand could take the abuse, that didn't necessarily mean that he was a glutton for punishment just to test the strength of it. This was proven when Gaara stepped out of the way suddenly along with his wall of sand, allowing the skidding Choji to roll past him with a screeching noise. Before Choji could stop himself, a wall did it for him when he crashed into it at full speed, smashing it into cracks and cavities. Ah, Kuso, he grunted before pulling himself out. He had only enough sense of mind to look behind him, only to see Gaara forming some sort of lance or spear in midair with his sand, and prepared to launch it through sheer manipulation. Holy, he quickly had to release his expansion technique, only just barely enough to avoid getting himself staked as the sand spear gouged so hard into the wall that it stayed there embedded. Shikamaru could only look as his teammate began to flee from where the sand had converged into a lance as it began to break apart into grains to surround him. Sensei, Choji's gonna get himself killed. While I think he's the strongest physically out of all of us genin, he can't fight Gaara who basically uses his sand as a defense and as projectiles. He's at a serious disadvantage. I've seen Gaara crush people in the forest without batting an eye, and he'll want to just kill Choji and be done with it. I know, Asuma answered with his voice tinged in worry. Maybe I should have been more stern when I said that I wanted to pull you guys from the exams. While you three might be a decent enough team together, your individual talents don't go very far when you're fighting on your own, especially not against a kid like that. Why did he insist on fighting Gaara? It's obvious that he knows that he's not a guy to be messed with. You saw how he was earlier. Maybe, Shikamaru mumbled as he watched Choji pull out a small triple case to remove the yellow curry pill to eat it. Maybe, he just wants to fight his turn like everybody else. Not to show off, but to show that he deserves to be here as much as everyone else. He might not be fighting to win, but just to show us that he's not to be taken lightly. Continuing to look on at the current fight, he noted that Choji was using partial expansions on his fists to rain blows down onto Gaara, who was being automatically protected by his sand at all points of interest. But I can't say for sure. I'm not in his head and it's too troublesome to try to do that. The only part that bothers me is that I don't know if I should cheer for him. Too troublesome? Asuma guessed, seeing that it was the boy's favorite quip. Of course not. He's my best friend, that's why I don't know if I should cheer. If I don't, he could lose confidence and forfeit, or if I do cheer, it cool. Make him overconfident and he'll continue the match needlessly, even if it means that he die. Asuma sighed. Well, when you say it like that I don't know what I should do either. Shikamaru, to this, only shook his head and gave his teacher a glare. Yes, you do. Just make sure that Choji doesn't die, sensei. Asuma nearly flinched when he heard that. To be honest, he was already starting tea. Oh, wonder if the Nara knew that Sakura had already passed on. Cripes, how would they all react when they found out? Especially Ino. Not now, Asuma. Focus on the matter at hand, the man told himself mentally. Yeah, I'll make sure. By now, Choji was sweating with effort as he continued to slam oversized punches at Gaara, and the boy's sand only bunched up to stop him every time. Despite the stray NGTH boost from the spinach pill and the calorie control from the curry pill, Gaara's sand remained stronger. In fact, it was becoming a pain just to lift his arms to throw punches. Gaara only stood and looked disinterested at the boy, almost content in watching the boy tire himself out. This continued for some time, and Naruto marveled at this. Damn, the Sanshoku no Ginyaku packs a punch. Literally. Whatcha mean? A voice inquired right into his ear. The Uzumaki jumped in alarm, giving himself more than just a few feet in distance from the asker. Damn, Fu-chan, don't scare me like that. In response to this, Shino looked up to notice the girl, and had the presence of mind to rest his hand on Hinata's shoulder. The last thing he wanted was for a repeat accident of what had happened earlier. Ah, I scared Awesome-sama. Did I? The Nanabe Jinchuriki grinned mischievously while looking at her crush. Don't worry, SSU. I just wanted to find out about that guy. She pointed at the fighters in the ring, and Naruto had a hard time telling who she was indicating. Who do you mean, Gaara? He leaned closer to her like a conspirator. You're talking about how he's like us. The creepy guy? Fu asked without any tact whatsoever. Nah, I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the fat. She trailed off, seeing the blonde giving her a cut-off sign. Oh, he's one of those people who are sensitive about their weight. I mean the big-boned one. He's got some crazy strength with those arms of his. Naruto's sweat dropped as he heaved an exhale. Of course that's what you mean. I think. I know about that after all the reading my clones after all the reading that I did. The pills are called Sanshoku no Ginyaku. 3 colored pills? Fu translated. That's kinda literal. So they just make him stronger? No, really just like that, but they do make him stronger by burning his calories. All I'm seeing is a rapid weight loss program. A red-headed Kunoichi from close by commented. Karui shrugged briefly as if she didn't care one way or another, but one could tell that she was a bit intrigued. He's looking way slimmer than when he stepped into the ring to fight. Well, that's what they do, Naruto continued. His clan eats, and they literally burn their fat as extra chakra. The pills are just helping him along because he hasn't mastered how to do that yet. Well, he's still losing. I bet that if I was down there throwing the punches, that Gaara kid wouldn't stand a chance. Fu declared. A team or so away, Kankuro could be heard snorting in laughter at the girl's announcement. But no one paid him any mind. You should rethink that strategy, 'cause as useful as brute strength is, it can't win all the time. Just look at Choji sweating down there, Naruto stated. Oh ho, brute strength can't win all the time, you say? Well, when we fight in the finals, you can gladly prove it. Fu challenged. Naruto thought on this for a moment, but merely shrugged. This actually threw Fu for a loop, as she had expected more of a reaction from him. This was obvious to the Uzumaki, but he kept all of his emotions internal. He did not want to fight anyone he considered precious, and she was one of them. Not just because she was showing a love interest in him, but because he considered her very dear to him. He tried to distract himself by watching the match, but found he couldn't stop himself from conversing with her. He guessed that he really liked her company. In the showground, however, Choji wasn't having such a grand time. He was nearly at his limit, and His stress and poisoning that the pills carried as a side effect was beginning to tell. He had no idea how long he'd fighting anymore, and that was the worst sign. If he'd been drawing out the match, the side effects would only get worse. He was so focused on this that he nearly missed the fact that Gaara was speaking. I grow bored. With that, the sand, instead of forming another hard shielding, became a spiked wall. The offensive edge pointing to Choji just as he was about to throw his last punch. The boy knew that he was in trouble. His stamina had waned, and his newfound chakra felt like it had gone to waste. To see Gaara only now making an offensive-type defense only went to show wide the gaps of their power were. The fact that he had allowed Choji to even attack him this long went to show that he was comfortable that he'd win. Choji didn't come to fight to win. Hell, he didn't even know why he had insisted on fighting when he didn't want to, when he was scared to. I'm no coward. I'm not afraid of a little pain. Drawing on the dregs of his chakra, he muscled himself for one final improvised technique that he was sure that not even Gaara could avoid even if he tried. I've got to go partial to my right arm. With the yell, his already thrown punch with his entire right arm suddenly blew up in size to a staggering degree. If it weren't big enough before, then Gaara, had he seen the arm if there wasn't a wall of sand shielding him, would be worried to see that there was a fist the size of a fucking building heading right for him. There were exclamations of surprise, yelled warnings from the Konkuro and just assorted shouts. However, there was none more louder than Choji himself. Chobaika no Jutsu, super expansion technique. The fist dwarfed the sand spikes of Gaara's defense. It was the equivalent of trying to hurt Choji's normal-sized hand with pin pricks. That was his offense. His defense, however, didn't stand a chance against the mass fist that slammed right through the wall of sand and into Gaara, which smashed him against the far wall behind him. It didn't stop there, however, as for the briefest of split seconds, Gaara was sandwiched between the gigantic fist and the foot-thick concrete wall, a rock and hard place, and smashed through to the outside. Rubble and debris flew this way and that, raising thick dust, but as soon as it all cleared, Gaara couldn't be seen anywhere, and what could be called a large fist-shaped hole was letting in daylight from the outside. Fuck, Enko heaved a sigh, wondering if she'd get to go home early after all. I told you, Fu chattered excitedly as she pointed down at Choji, whose arm was already shrinking to normal size before it hung limply from his side. Might is right, but you're not right, Naruto argued. Gaara hasn't lost yet. There's not even a rule about being out of bounds for the preliminary exams. Naruto-kun, take a look down there. Gaara's probably dead. I mean, that Choji guy looks like he just killed the wall, and it's not even a living thing. If Gaara can even talk right now, it'd be a miracle. Far below in the ring, Enko had heard the girl and she was inclined to agree. The winner of this bout is Cho. Wait, Konkuro shouted as he pointed over at the hole in the wall. Look over there, he's coming back inside. Indeed, Gaara, despite the odds, walked back inside, although it was noticed that he was limping, and sand seemed to be falling freely from off of him like a second skin. There were a few there who couldn't believe their eyes when they saw the Sabaku. As they'd already had him written off as dead, Choji wasn't one of them, as it was already a foregone conclusion in his mind that he couldn't win. He never doubted himself, he only knew that Gaara was too strong for him. I guess the fight's continuing, Enko observed as she stepped backwards again. No, Choji whispered to himself as he pulled out his triple case again. It's ending. Only the red chili pill is left. But if I take it, he slowly removed the pill from the case, staring at it. If I take it, I'll die. Nonetheless, he surprised himself by raising it to his lips. He was actually willing to eat it. Hey, Naruto yelled from the balcony. What the hell are you doing, Choji? If you eat the red pill, you'll die. To this, Asuma looked up in surprise. From H.E. and Shikamaru's angle from where they were, he hadn't even noticed that it was what the boy was doing. I can beat him if I eat it. I'll get 100 times stronger. Choji yelled back. Gaara's EYs finally showed some new emotion besides jaded bloodlust for the first time, and he stared at his opponent with interest. 100 times stronger, he could prove my existence. In this light, instead of attacking, he chose to wait to see if the boy would ingest the pill after all, yet not knowing if he would actually take it or not. It'll be a crappy victory when you die, Choji, Shikamaru yelled. To even raise his voice was out of character for him, but the Akamichi was his best friend and it warranted that change in him. What are you trying to prove? That you can win? No, that's not what he wanted. Choji, throughout the fight, hadn't been sure what he wanted and had gobbled pills in an effort to boost his power. Who would want to win a fight that came from drugs? Not he. What did he want? As he stared back at Gaara across from him, Choji suddenly realized what he had wanted. It wasn't about the pecking order of things. He wasn't just the overweight guy, only known for stuffing his face. He wasn't just a clan heir. In his mind, there was a pecking order to things when it came to their generation, and it had been an idea in his mind that he was the weakest one of them all. He hadn't won this fight. That he knew, but he knew it wasn't because he was too weak to win. It was the reverse of Gaara being much too strong. He had shown everyone what he was capable of, and he was the heavy hitter of Team Ino Shika Cho for a reason. He had been doubting himself, but as he was staring at how much damage Gaara had taken, versus the rumors that he'd never even gotten hurt before, now he knew. Choji Akamichi wasn't weak. That's what he wanted. He wanted to know that he was strong. With this realization, he dropped the pill to the floor, and crushed it to red grains under his heel. Proctor, I forfeit. Anko nodded. Fine. Winner, Gaara of the desert. Hardly had this been had Choji started to amble off, mumbling something about how hungry he was. He hadn't gone far before he face-planted in a comical sprawl, and his sensei had to come into the showground to help him up. Amidst the laughter of the scene that rose up, Asuma was praising his student, promising to reward him by paying for his meal later on. Gaara wasn't pleased. The Mitarashi took a casual moment to stretch, and her joints could be heard popping before she straightened up to address the crowd of genins before her. Well, except for the last couple of matches, the exams have been a real bore. I, for one, am glad it's all over. Nani, Lee cried out in surprise. It's over? I never even got to fight. Kid, are you really that dense? Anko asked rhetorically. You're the odd man out because there wasn't an even number of fighters. Take a minute to appreciate that you're going GHT to the finals because you didn't even have to fight, and keep quiet before I disqualify you. I didn't even get to fight either, and I was hoping that Anko would let me fight the odd man out. Naruto grumbled under his breath. Dumb Shika. Without even a word, Shikamaru used a Kujimane to control Naruto and made him slap his face hard. Damn it, you hit yourself too, you idiot. Shikamaru didn't rise to comment, and he only silently rubbed his red face as he watched Anko turn on the Uzumaki to chew him out. Worth it, as I was saying before I was interrupted, Anko continued before staring at Naruto pointedly. The preliminaries are over, and all that's left is the finals. All of the losers step back to stand with their senseis, and the winners step forward to take a number out of the box on the stand. She pointed to said object on an improvised weight-bearing column that was created by a Doden technique. Pick a number, and it'll decide who you will be fighting during the finals. Shouldn't this have some sort of a ceremony, Anko? Kurenai asked from where she stood beside Asuma with his genins. She was well aware that the Hokage should have been the one to do it, but to see her friend take things this far meant that the stunt she'd pulled during the last part of Ibiki's first phase had a lot of consequences, but certainly not this much. I'm not the one to do it. The person who ought to have done this got caught up in something of greater importance. The Mitarashi was vague, and for good reason. It'd be downright shameful if she just told everyone that it was the Hokage's responsibility. And he skipped out on it. Something important had indeed come up, and she knew damn well what it was. Uzumaki, huh? It's always about that guy. Oh, alright, then, one by one, each of the winning fighters of the prelims approached the box and under the Tokubetsu Junin's watchful gaze, removed a folded note from the inside. Upon which, they went back to their place. In the lateral line where they all faced her but according to the woman's instruction, did not open the note until she informed them. Anko nodded before she turned back to face the crowd in general. Listen, you don't have to have an ear to the ground to know that I've fucked up the ending of the first phase, and had to heavily improvise the second phase. However, the preliminary fights have decided who the best is among you. And those people will have to fight in the finals in exactly 1 month from now. During that month, you will be training to improve yourself, patch your problem areas essentially not make any screw-ups like I did when it's your turn to fight. If I have to be completely frank, you're all going to beat each other using brawn, tactics, skill, judgment and on the why lateral thinking in such a way that a Chunin would. The winners of these fights don't necessarily become Chunin, and the losers don't have to be ousted from a chance of becoming Chunin either. Us have to display the characteristics to the panel of judges. We could just fight right now, correct? Lee asked in confusion. He was among the freshest and peppiest there since he hadn't fought at all. Not to mention the fact that he was extremely eager to show what he was capable of. Where is this panel of judges? Are they not here? No, what's your name? Lee, I think, Anko asked. Seeing him nod, she went on. Well, Lee, the panel of judges will basically be the Kages, daimyos and Junin senseis of each region and village you hail from. To answer your question, I've been informed it will take a month to prepare everything and give them time to arrive now that they will have received proper notification. As to their decision-making, they are the ones who decide if you become Chunins. Of course, the higher-ranking personnel of your village such as the Kage can veto the decision to their favor, and the daimyo can veto that if they want to. Essentially, you're all going to G Avenue to fight to impress every one of them while you fight each round in the finals as if it were a tournament. Simple. She then unsealed a clipboard from a storage seal she had on hand, and got prepared to write on a sheet affixed to it. Now, you may all unfold the notes to see who you will be fighting. There are 2 of every number, and those who share like numbers will be each other's combatants. When I call for your number, you'll tell me your names. Now, who has number 1? I do. My name is Fu, the Taki Kunoichi called from where she stood at Naruto's right. Nobody else called for that number, and Enko informed her that it meant that Ino Yamanaka was the one she'd be fighting. Whose the heck is Wild Boar? Fu asked to herself when she translated the name in her mind. Ino, Naruto whispered. She's the long-haired girl who fought the wind user from Suna. Oh, already, Fu was disinterested when she realized who it was. It's the girl that did what mind raped the other one. Geez, okay, who has number 2? I do, Hinata called. My name is Hyuga Hinata. I do as well, Tenten announced. Higurashi Tenten. In a panicky moment, they both realized that they'd have to fight one another. Even worse, they realized that the winner of their fight would have to go against Fu, and judging by the wide grin on her face, they could see that Fu had realized this as well. Oh joy, Kurama commented. It's like a catfight, but more official and probably more bloodier. It won't come to that, Naruto yelled mentally, before he calmed down. I'll talk to everyone. I won't have anyone fighting over me. So you do know that they want you. Naruto didn't have a reply. Who has number 3? I do. My name is Aburame Shino. Samui. I have number 3 as well. Both ninjas subtly glanced at one another and unintentionally locked eyes in a staring contest like before when they had started the second phase of the exams. It actually became noticeable for Hinata to tap her teammate on his shoulder in order to bring him back to the present. Anko continued to call out numbers. Who has number 4? I do, and my name is Kuritsuchi of Iwa. I do as well. My name is Karui, from Kumogakure. Anko wrote down their names. And who has number 5? I do. My name Kinyuta Dosu, the heavily bandaged Oto ninja said quietly. I as well, Neji announced as he looked to see whom he would be fighting. My name is Hyuga Neji. Right, Anko quickly penned their names on the sheet of paper. And who has number 6? I do, Naruto started to say, but his heart fell in his gut when he saw Lee starting to yell that he had number 6, as if trying to get the woman to write his name first. Cripes, I guess I'm fighting Rock Lee. Well, I beat him before, right? The guy who punches like a boulder. Good luck. I hope you called to mind that when you 2 fought in the forest, you only won because you electrocuted him through his weights. If he takes that off, he'll lose the handicap. And he'd gain surefire speed advantage. You're gonna get your face smashed in. Oh shit, okay. And who has the last number? Number 7? I do. My name is Gaara of the Sand, the boy intoned. Right after this, Omoi seemed to clamp up, and Karui couldn't believe the reaction of her teammate. What the hell's that sniveling sound? Are you crying? No, the boy said most decidedly as he quickly swiped at his eyes comically with his shirt sleeve. I have number 7 as well. My name is Omoi of Kumo. Anko nodded to this and wrote his name, but inside, she was laughing at the genin. Poor guy. Don't worry, Omoi. If you win, it means you get to skip straight to the semifinals. That's why it's the 7th number. It means less fighting. I thought Hat was because there's an odd number of us in the. Naruto quickly worked it out in his head. Quarterfinals. When Gaara kills Omoi, suddenly hearing the youth facepalm himself, the Uzumaki quickly rectified his statement. Sorry, Omoi. I mean that when Gaara or Omoi wins, there'll be 7 people. True. Now then, you all have your instructions. So get your asses prepared to fight, and you'll all be notified of the venue and time of your bouts. You're all dismissed. Yeah, Naruto cheered, already beginning to regain his spirits, coming to grasp the fact that no one still really knew what he was capable of. 1 month before I kick all of your asses. Before he could leave with his team, however, he felt a hand grab him by the collar. Hey, who the Enko-san? Oh damn, why'd I keep getting singled out? It's not that. The woman's tone was serious, and left no room for rebuttal. There's a special summons for you by the Hokage himself. You're coming with me. By now, Kurenai and the rest of the members of Team 8 had seen this development, and the sensei asked the question that was on all of their minds. Should we come too? Can we? The summons is for Uzumaki only. No one could really ask Naruto how he felt, nor should they. They could tell that he was obviously displeased with the situation, but he acquiesced with the woman's demand. And if he had any complaint, it's not as if she was prepared to hear him out anyway. Alright, let's go. Year 0 Naruto is born. His parents died, that is, killed, and the current suspects are Canons Obito, the OC known as Ito, or a sane Kyuubi. The true culprit is unknown to Naruto. Year 6 Naruto is kicked out of the orphanage on his birthday. During this year, Hinata, now 5 years old, is kidnapped by Kumo ninjas. A powerful ninja debuts to save Hinata, and it's now known that it was a fusion of both him and Kurama. The day after Hinata is saved, Naruto meets the Kyuubi in his seal and they make a deal in Wick. The Kyuubi would give 100 favors in exchange for better living conditions inside the seal. Year 8 on his 8th birthday, Naruto is badly beaten by a mob, but saved by Ito Udatane. After waking up in the hospital, he flees to Wave Country, leaving a Yuki Bunshin behind in the Leaf Village so that he is not missed. In Wave with his adopted family, Kaiza, Tazuna, Inari and Tsunami, Naruto manifests his Kekai Genkai. The first of which is understanding, then memory not too long afterwards. Understanding gave him extreme deduction and logic skills, and his memory became perfectly eidetic. Infallible. In his travel bag there, he discovered a few scrolls for the self-tutoring of techniques, along with a telescope baton and a tanto. It was given to him by Ito Udatane, whom he now believes is responsible for the death of his parents, shown by how well he seemed to know Naruto and hated his father. Meanwhile, the Leaf Village finally becomes completely destitute due to lack of money in the treasuries. Caused by the Kyuubi's attack and the Hokage's insistence on rebuilding the village as priority. The Uchiha clan is slaughtered, except for the civilians, and due to this, Konoha loses their policing. Tenten's family is killed in a grab for land. Her new foster parents later on are killed as well, and she develops a phobia of explosions. Year 9 now 9.5 years old, Naruto returns from Wave. Only to find Konoha on the verge of total economic ruin, although his normal stipend benefited him more than most people. Incidentally, he saves Tenten from being carried off by the land grabbers and though catatonic, takes care of her. Deciding that he liked helping, he decided to be a vigilante of sorts, but mostly done as a means to train by fighting potentially criminal ninjas inside the village. He dons a feral-looking mask to disguise himself, and soon becomes stronger. He develops an idealism complex hereafter. Ito Udatane embeds a formula for a created Kekai Genkai in Tenten. For reasons yet to be known, the Kekai Genkai gives one perfect spatial awareness, 3-dimensional perception and emotion empathy censoring. Naruto gets his wooden necklace back from Ito shortly afterwards. As the economy began to improve in the Hidden Leaf, Naruto realized that his stipend no longer benefited him as it used to. Posturing as the powerful ninja that had saved Hinata years prior, Naruto got the Hokage and Hiashi to build a soup kitchen where he could possibly get meals, and an orphanage that he could hopefully move, then created 2 Yuki Bunshins that LD take charge in the orphanage, Masato, and a beggar, who would outsource his meals to him from the soup kitchen. Year 10 the orphanage is completed, and on his birthday, Naruto flees with Tenten to the orphanage for sanctuary. Once there, however, it is discovered that there is only room for 2 more people, but Naruto gives his place to another orphan, Asami. Along the way back to his home, he accidentally runs into a large mob of angry villagers, who almost completely lynch him. Although he survives, his memories of the event is so traumatic, worsened by his perfect eidetic memory, that he begs the Kyuubi to suppress his abilities and his memory so that he can move past the event mentally. He nearly becomes retarded, so to speak, and even his short-term memory is easily shot. Year 1. 3. The suppression seal is almost at its end, and the Kyuubi lifts it before both him and Naruto go insane. In the process, Naruto unlocks his third ability, focus. It gave him perfect aim, a flawless mental state to allot his now expansive attention span and a markedly improved pain tolerance. When beating Mizuki, he memorizes a portion of the scroll of sealing, particularly the elemental techniques, the Kage Bunshin, the elemental variants along with how to induce them to explode. In addition, he learns how to create gravity seals to boost his resistance training. He passes the academy requirement to be a genin, and is placed on Team 8 with Hinata, Shino with a prejudiced Kurenai as the Junin sensei. Deciding that to further his ambitions of someday avenging his parents, Naruto undergoes further training by placing clones in the library and hospital to gain knowledge and learn basic medical techniques. During training with Team 8, Naruto manifests his fourth ability, reflex. It made him able to react to dangers that not even he himself is aware of, and is reliant on his body's inherent ability to perceive hazards. First mission arc, Kimyo Town. The team undergo a mission to Kimyo Town to investigate minor earth tremors and petty thefts of certain trees. During this mission, the animosity between Naruto and his team rises, making for a lack of team cohesion. During his own investigation, Naruto discovers that slaves are being kept by new cannons below the aquifer to dig for gold, and they are being sustained by Tonikawota leaves. Said leaves are discovered to boost longevity and stamina, and provide a chakra boost of sorts. Due to sabotage by an elite new cannon, the mission difficulty rises, forcing Kurenai to withdraw her team from the operation. There is a complication that would have guaranteed the destruction of Kimyo Town due to explosives in the dried-up aquifer below the town, but only Naruto fully grasped this. In insubordination to Kurenai, he stays in the town and fights the new cannon with Leaf Village reinforcements, Kohyuga and Iruka, killing the new cannon after using a successful countermeasure to prevent the bombs from going off in the aquifer. The town is saved and Naruto sends off a clone back to the village with the reinforcements in his stead, where Naruto is disciplined for insubordination and suspended from ninja duties, which the clone sees to. Meanwhile, the real Naruto creates the Tenacious 13, a group of himself and 12 clones that each specialize in fundamental ninja pursuits. During the process, Naruto ingests 2 Nikawota leaves and his massive chakra reserves increase even further. They mine for gold and are successful. They all train with one another, and try to perfect the A-rank techniques Naruto memorized from the scroll of sealing. While still suspended, Naruto and his brothers journey to Taki. During this time, they meet Fu, and help her fight her murderous uncle who despised her. They spend the remainder of his suspension training together and having fellowship, and at the end, Naruto slips back into the village. Second mission arc, Nami no Kuni. Soon after, Naruto and Team 8 undergo a mission to Wave Country to protect his adopted grandfather, Tazuna. After protecting him from bandits and getting him to his home safely, Naruto soon discovers that his adoptive father, Kaiza, had been murdered by Gato. Soon after, Naruto has a falling out with Shino on an issue of trust, and nearly kills him with an expansive fire technique that the new cannons, Haku, Gozu, Maizu and Zabuza, see from far off and are intimidated by it. While investigating it, Haku encounters Naruto by himself, and while speaking with him, and comforting him about Kaiza's death, she discovers that he is the cause of the jutsu and he wishes to kill Gato for revenge. After hearing about this, Zabuza feels the need to wage a war of attrition against Team 8, figuring that if a genin could be this powerful, then a junin could be even worse. With this tactic, they use the hidden in mist jutsu, and fence off the back of the house with barbed and razor wire, effectively stranding them from potential help and escape. Anyone foolish enough to venture from the house would be hampered in the mist, and killed instantly. In the house over the next few days, tension rises to the point that Naruto allows the Kyuubi to take over his body, who lambasts Kurenai for her treatment of his container. There is a sort of communion in this moment, and Naruto decides to mentally call his brothers for reinforcements. In a daring escape, 5 of his brothers Those that sense, torture, heal, electrocute and assassinate. Gozu and Maizu are killed and the mist jutsu is lifted. Immediately after, Haku is taken prisoner by the torture clone, who believes she has vital information about Gato. With the other clones, however, they continue to fight Zabuza, and are soon caught up in the fight against Anbus from the hidden mist. Naruto and his brothers decided against fighting, since the Anbus were primarily out to kill Zabuza. After Haku begged Naruto, to the point of selling herself as a slave to him, Naruto and his brothers join Zabuza and kill off all the mist Anbus. During this, Haku is nearly killed, and in an effort to save her life as well as his own, Naruto unlocks his next ability, Insight. It's a dojutsu that tags everything of interest in his environment, boosts his deduction skills, and provides battle tactics that constantly refresh every quarter second in step-by-step plans, achieving up to 10,172. 525 possible results at any given point in time. In the next course of action, they defeat Gato's lackeys before torturing him to death. After absorbing the man's monies into his accounts, Naruto purchased resources from the Leaf Village to rebuild Nami no Kuni, and shortly afterwards, the bridge is dubbed the Bridge of Resilience. Naruto finally gets over his grief after seeing an apparition of Kasaiza wave goodbye to him. Shortly afterwards, everyone leaves Nami no Kuni. The bloodline thief is spotted in Suna, antagonizing Gaara. Ito nearly kills Kakashi and Sasuke when they intervene. The Leaf Village now recognizes the bloodline thief as a threat, and Sasuke awakens his Sharingan. Third mission arc. Ryasu Town. Soon after, Naruto purchases a house so that he and Haku can coexist comfortably. He is called in for a new mission. On discovery about a complication, all Genin teams need to perform a B-ranked mission in order to qualify for the upcoming Chunin exams. Team 7, Team 8, Team 10, Team Guy undertake one to investigate bloody murders in Ryasu Town that are unnatural. During this mission, with Naruto's help, Tenten finally remembers her void memories of what happened before she came to live in the orphanage. Feeling a bit threatened by Tenten's apparent closeness to her crush, Hinata asks Naruto out on a date, but Tenten tries to sabotage Naruto's nature by telling him to act around girls, that is, badly. Though she eventually stops him before any real damage is caused, Naruto storms off to meet up with Hinata as planned, but realizing that his friendship with Tenten was at stake. Hinata tells him that Tenten did what she did because she, Tenten, loved him and was jealous that he was going out with Hinata. Upset by this, Naruto chases after her, but they are both nabbed by the creatures committing the grisly murders in the town, which are actually summoned creatures, such as hyenas and some others. Knocked unconscious and brought back to the lair of the creatures, a gigantic library of lost knowledge, Naruto and Tenten meet the scavengers, the summoned creatures. They both make the decision to enter a contract with them, upon condition that they'd help the summons return to the realm that they belong to. The pair eventually return back to the others and share what they learned, but shortly afterwards, Naruto falls into a coma, as well as every one of his clones, after the two clones finish reading all the books in Konoha's library. The mission, though a success, was dampened by the fact that Naruto had to be rushed back to Konoha to be admitted into the hospital. Year 14, on Naruto's 14th birthday, he subconsciously streaks through the village to get to Konoha's library. As if possessed, he writes out a riddle. My picture looks over the village. It's worth a few hundred words, before completely waking up from his coma. After celebrating his birthday with Tenten, Fu, Hinata and a few of his brothers, it was soon time to begin the Chunin exams. Final arc Chunin exams. Plot points. Haku accuses the Hokage of keeping Naruto's heritage secret from him. Ito is working with Orochimaru to gain the cursed seal for himself. O is discovered spying on the exams by Anko. Fu kills Sakura. Sasuke is left in critical condition. Naruto finds a rival in Karatsukuchi. Exam finals roster. First, Fu vs. Ino. Second, Hinata vs. Tenten. Third, Samui vs. Shino. Fourth, Kuratsuchi vs. Karui. Fifth, Dosu vs. Neji. Sixth, Naruto vs. Lee. Seventh, Gaara vs. Omoi. Ages: Naruto, 14, Fu, 15, Haku, 15, Hinata, 13, Tenten, 15. Naruto's abilities: Kekai Genkai, nicknamed the Eight. On the middle of his forehead are 3 concentric circles, with arrows coming out of the middle and extending past the boundaries of the circles in cardinal and ordinal directions like a compass. It is symbolic that he is growing in each aspect and breaking his limits, so to speak. His most passive abilities are the smallest arrows, and they point to the east and to the west. They pass through only one circle. Abilities that have a bigger impact on him are middle-sized and pass through two circles, for the north and south. His most powerful abilities are represented by OWS that pass through all three concentric lines and point in ordinal directions. West arrow, understanding. East arrow, memory. North arrow, focus. South arrow, reflex. Northeast arrow, insight, the dojutsu. Northwest arrow, southeast arrow, southwest arrow. It has been said that the Yondaime created this Kekkei Genkei using sealing techniques in order to use a particular jutsu and utilize it at its fullest. Ito Udatane, the bloodline thief, once a rival for the title of Yondaime, wants this Kekkei Genkei for his own. The Tenacious 13, names, name meaning, ninja aspect, role, character nature. Naruto, maelstrom, leader, self-righteous. Narcase, wind, futon user, sarcastic. Narshaku, shock, Raiden user. Meek, Narkasai, fire, Kaden user. Loner, Narmazu, water, Sweden user. Braggart, Nariwa, rock, Doden user. Stubborn, Narishi, doctor. Team's medic, bossy. Narsensa, censor. Team's censor, short-tempered. Naruso, blacksmith. Ninja tool specialist. Rash, Narkin, sword. Kenjutsu specialist. Blunt, Nartai, physical. Taijutsu specialist. Impatient. Narkira, killer. Espionage, eliminator. Philosophical. Narbure, contemptuous. Torturer and interrogator. Neurotic, scavengers summoning roster. Kuro, crow. Hyena, hyena. Tokage, lizard. Jakaru, jackal. Hegawashi, vulture. Tobu, fly. First things came first, second things came second, so on and so forth. Thing S usually followed a pattern, and Naruto prided himself on finding patterns and predicting outcomes, especially when it came to using his dojutsu. As he listened to everyone in the hall just talk amongst themselves in no apparent pattern, his headache grew more and more. His abilities to keep focus were being taxed, and he was sure as hell hoping that everyone was suffering a headache as much as he was. It didn't help much that he was at the front, being in the direction that everyone was staring and soon to be yelling at. The council building, at least, the one he had read about, was not the one he was currently in. Nor was it being used at all. In fact, of all the stupidest things, he was in the academy, the very same he had loathed being in when he was aspiring to become a ninja. In the academy, they had demolished all the walls that separated the classes by presumably using some sort of Doden technique to generally turn almost the entire institution into one gigantic hall building. Sure, it was secured by every door and window and cracked by various anbias and jutsus, such as fuinjutsu seals for keeping things covert. But it was probably pointless as everyone who was anyone was already inside the hall. That included a goodish number of standard junins, almost all the elites, all the clan heads, and a fairly large number of civilians. They were all aristocratic, mind you, all important by means of land ownership or being some sort of district leader or a civilian council member, but they were almost the same in Naruto's eyes. They shared the same look, their eyes radiated a similar level of hatred and bias towards him, and they all spoke a little too damn loud. The seating was rather unconventional. There were seats accompanied by tables in a large semicircle that Ost encircled the large table that Naruto himself and the Hokage was seated at, along with Kurenai close by. Homura wasn't seated, and stood to one side as if like some sort of mediator or prosecutor. Naruto sure felt that way, as it was starting to feel like it was actually a trial. He glanced upwards to the clock, the very same that he used to look at when he was in the academy, hoping for the bell to ring to signify the time to go home. Damn, I've only been here for 10 minutes. They're gonna fuck with you, Naruto. I'm not gonna lie, the Kyuubi warned. If you're gonna last long in this meeting, you're going to have be unfuckwithable. Don't nod off, don't yawn. Speak when you're spoken to and tear down the bastards who try to tear you down. You're practically the reason why I'm sitting here. Shut up and let me finish. Listen, if you're gonna last long, you can't afford to crack, and if you do, Just don't let him notice. We can't afford to let them take every scrap of information we're keeping secret. Information is power, and we can't allow some of these people to get any of both. In fact, if you're going to say anything, tell them exactly what they don't want to hear. That goes for everyone, from the Hokage down to the simple civilian. It's bad enough that he hasn't been the most supportive. Even I know you make it hard for him sometimes, but he's supposed to look out for you. Isn't that what he's for? To take care of the denizens of his village? I suppose so, but you sound kind of worried. You know that I won't blab about certain things, like my abilities. I'm not worried, the Kyuubi lied. Just remember to keep your mouth shut, and you won't get lynched. Or at least detained. Now, if we're all settled. Homura's voice seemingly came back into focus as Naruto began to listen. We can begin the inquiry. We have several topics that concern the Uzumaki, all of which were submitted by you all, and were compiled to be queried. Uzumaki has already sworn to tell the truth, and nothing but the truth, and the truth is that he's innocent. A voice cackled from the back, raising a few chuckles from a couple of Junins and discreet smiles from certain clan head. Everyone parted and turned to look to where the culprit was, but he was nowhere to be seen. In the meanwhile, Naruto was fuming as he realized that the culprit was probably Narbure, who probably entered the hall with the other civilian leaders. Holy shit, why is he here? Naruto tried to mentally reach out to the torture clone, but like a phone, Narbure just didn't pick up. Is anyone else in here? So help me Kami, you guys had better not make this worse for me. You'd better leave, or at least just keep your mouths shut. All of a sudden, there was a commotion on the mental link. And it was with horror that Naruto realized that at least 9 of the T-13 members were present in the room, and it didn't bode well with him. My head's gonna end up on a pike, isn't it? Naruto lamented under his breath. Shaking his head, Homura ignored the cackle as best as he could, though his annoyance was clear. First on the agenda is the matter of Naruto Uzumaki's matters of insubordination, on several counts. It has been argued that he neglects to properly follow instructions to the letter, willfully withholds information from his sensei and behaves as if he's a maverick. Turning to the document he had in his hand, Homura continued. The incident in Kimyo Town and his actions on the mission therein has already been dealt with, but it has come to everyone's attention his behavior in Nami no Kuni and Ryasu Town was unbecoming and questionable. Was he punished? A Junin asked with a frown on his face. I'm not a maverick, Naruto exclaimed. Besides, I got good mission results. Uzumaki, the Hokage didn't yell, but might as well have considering the level of presence he just commanded. Be silent until you're prompted to speak. What? Naruto gaped before going silent. What the hell is this? A one-sided trial or something? I told you to keep your trap shut. Let them accuse you, throw their weight around, then defend yourself by accusing them. It's as simple as that. Your clones passed on a whole library worth of knowledge, so don't act as if you're the brat they think you are. This is their game, so play by their rules for now. Fine. As I was saying before the interruption, the Junin stated, I was asking if he was punished. It's standard for insubordination or any sort of wily behavior to be reprimanded with suspension of a ninja's license. Or to be debarred permanently from any ninja duties. Even anything like getting lashes, no matter how old-fashioned, would be acceptable. By either the Hokage or the supervising Junin, was he punished or not? I cannot answer for both counts, Kurenai answered loudly so that all could hear. I did not supervise him for the mission in Ryasu Town. However, he went unpunished because he did not commit insubordination during the mission to Wave Country. Any sort of wily fighting with other Leaf Ninjas falls under insubordination, and it's well known that he and one of his fellow teammates had a falling out. As soon as the Junin spoke, there were some whisperings about the demon this, and the demon that, showing his true colors when he nearly burned his teammate to a crisp. You must have heard rumors, but we have actual statements. Shino said he did not fight Naruto, and Naruto claimed that he didn't fight Shino. There were no witnesses, so that matter was resolved. Nothing happened. Kurenai lied through her teeth. She allowed a smirk to ghost her face, and the questioning Junin didn't like it. Then what of the fight between Neji Hyuga and Uzumaki? Are you going to tell me that there wasn't fight between them? Kurenai grumbled something heatedly under her breath, wondering why the hell this Junin was even asking questions like this. Was he intention? Ally trying to paint Naruto in a bad color before the situation worsened later on? Though it was clear that she wasn't on good terms with her student in the past, she'd come to see him in a better light, but geez. She always knew he was a magnet for trouble. I would rather you direct that question to Asuma Sarutobi and Maeda Guy. And I can answer that, Asuma volunteered, not wishing for Guy to answer, frankly speaking. Naruto kicked Neji's ass, and for good reason. Although it can be said that Naruto threw the first punch, a fight usually starts long before then. Snide behavior, insults, the works. And Neji had that in bucketfuls. However, if someone has to bear responsibility, then I'll take full responsibility for everyone's actions. I had enough opportunities to stop them, but I chose not to. All because I wanted to see how things would turn out. It was negligent of me, and I extend my apologies to all parties involved. The Junin posing the question cursed to himself. He had hoped to get the Kyuubi brat into hot water, but that wasn't going to happen, at least, not yet. Well, since you're bearing responsibility, Hokage-sama shall deal with you as he sees fit, correct? That is correct, Hiruzen affirmed, though he had no intention of doing so. Are all the matters about Naruto's insubordination settled? On every other count in his ninja history, he has been documented as following orders. What about withholding information? Hiashi argued. Team 8 almost perished in Nami no Kuni. I may respect the fact that he has strength, that boy, but he's too tight-lipped about critical info and it's troubling. I posed this question to his Junin leader. Tight-lipped, that he is indeed. He'd make for a good spy if he should ever get caught by the enemy. Please answer the question, Kurenai-san. Kurenai's smile vanished. My student withholds information, that much is true. It's infuriating working with him, I won't lie, though I have come to understand why. Naruto does this because he has trust issues. Not with us, in particular, but everyone, as far as I can see. Speaking from a neutral point of view, Naruto loves the village, but dislikes everyone until he meets those that change his mind. Given the fact of his Jinchuriki status that we're all aware of, it's not hard to imagine why. Withholding information that is relevant to any operation is still unforgivable, despite one's personal feelings. Hiashi said sternly, my own daughter is on his team, and what if she were to die because of his nature? We don't want him to speak about his own secrets, but at least discuss information relevant to the mission. Uzumaki, why are you like this? Naruto was nearly ready to nod off to sleep despite the Kyuubi's warnings and straightened up. Because I can. Ow, that everything that happens on mission goes on record. For all I care, someone can just burn those records down because they just talk about everything bad I do, and never have anything good to say. They don't even have my parents documented there, but it just lauds my status. I mean, really? Can't we fire the record keepers? That is besides the point. Answer the question, Homura said grimly. They want to know about my brothers, but they're not getting that. In Kimyo Town, I became an insubordinate. I had to. I mean, why would I try to talk to a sensei who, he stopped short, meeting the woman's eyes. We've changed for the better, but histories can't be cleaned. We hated each other since we hated each other, we didn't want to work with one another. So like two different nations, we withheld information and tried to get the mission done without each other's help. So far as anyone really knows, so far as anyone goddamn cares, I'm loud, uppity and a bastard Jinchuriki that should bleed out in a ditch somewhere. So that's why I'm selfish with info. I realize now that I was wrong to treat my teammates my friends don't hate me, when I mistakenly thought that they'd be just like everyone else who did. But rest assured, when something becomes anyone's business to know, I'll tell them. The language is coarse, but your answer seems reasonable. At least we know why. It's because you're biased. It's because I'm biased against. Don't blame me, it's just how I was raised. You know it takes a village. The Uzumaki's eyes ran over everyone in the hall in an accusatory manner. Enough said. That's one hell of a way to call us out, Naruto. Hitomi thought to himself as she eyed her husband try to keep himself composed. But I suppose he is right, we really should have done something, at least. He probably thinks we're all out to get him. Is that all the village wants to know? Naruto asked, almost rudely. 'Cause I've got some training to do, and the finals are coming up. Ah, training. That's another issue, Homura remarked. That of where you learned your techniques. It's easy to explain away how you learned to create cage bunchins, and whoever doesn't know. W is simply unaware of the Mizuki incident. However, it's been observed that you know how to perform certain jutsus of every element. Create bunchins that wield different elements, and you're capable of creating clones that explode. Also, you know medical techniques. Could I just stop you right there? Naruto interrupted. We get the idea. I know a lot. Where do you learn it? How about I tell you where I didn't learn it? At the academy, that's what. Every ninja in here knows all of these things. Teachers in the academy at least know most of these things. But Kami knows that not one of you even gave me the time of day. Much less tutored these things to me. What's the big deal behind asking me how and where I learn it? What, don't want to see me getting on ahead in life? You seem rather accusatory. Homura replied passive-aggressively. We simply want to know where and how you learned your techniques. I'm self-taught, from reading scrolls here and there. Naruto growled through clenched teeth, giving everyone a heated look, wondering if they just wanted to see him held back from progressing in his life. So if you're worried that there might be a chance of the fox teaching me, you're wrong. He's only been lecturing me to respect my elders. He's not doing a very good job of it. Kurenai chortled under her breath. Asuma snorted in laughter as well, but straightened up when the Hokage glared at him. It's nigh near impossible to use chakra natures that are not specific to you if you're less than an elite Junin. Yet, you use 5? Why is that? A chakra affinity is T something that everyone is normally attuned to, and it's based on their particular nature. Although it varies from person to person, it's largely based on your balance of yin and yang in your body, as well as how much chakra you have. Simply put, I supply the chakra, and the Kyuubi changes it according to the recipe of different levels of yin and yang that helps to optimize it for each type of jutsu I use. So if I say, Kyuubi, let's make fire, he takes my normal wind affinity chakra, removes some of the yin, adds more yang, and it changes into fire. It takes us a while to do it perfectly, though, so if I just jump into battle doing it, it still taxes me. Spying a chance to possibly glean more information about this subject, a Junin asked if this particular subject was teachable, but Naruto insisted that it wasn't. No, it's only particular to me. Maybe other Jinchurikis in other villages can do what I do. Who knows? Besides, I'm not exactly teaching savvy. I have another question. Homura spoke up. It's been noticed by some parties that you have a dojutsu. I've been messing around with contact lenses. Naruto said quickly, as if he'd rehearsed it. Gives me the impression that I'm stronger. Bullshit, a Chunin cried. Just like that, the room fell into chaos, and the Hokage released a wave of killing intent strong enough to make the more seasoned ninjas almost cower away in fright. After this, the Hokage turned to Naruto and started to speak. He wasn't severe and stern. He was just loud enough to speak to Naruto only, yet his voice seemed to carry around the whole room as if strengthened by his influence, and the boy had to listen. Naruto, I don't know whose advice you're following, or if you're just being whimsical in your speech. This is an inquiry. This isn't some gossiping corner, or like a friendly discussion. In any case, I should also say that this is not a trial. We're here to learn the truth, and each time you deny a fact or lie, you paint yourself into a corner. You have nothing to gain or lose here, but what you say here today decides how we'll all look at you in the future, that of a liar, or a member of this village. It was easy to interpret this part. Either tell the truth, or get debarred from the village. He'd become a nuke nin. In fact, he could imagine leaving the village and having a slash through his headband, and the thought scared him a little. Not just for his sake, but having to leave people behind. All the people he cared about in the village, no matter how few, he'd have to tell them goodbye. He could see them in his mind's eye, waving goodbye to him at the village gates as they shut, closing him outside of the village to fend for himself. He gritted his teeth. He could feel his anger rising as he considered the unfairness of his situation. Hokage-sama, Naruto started to say in a trembling voice, discreetly to the old man. I am not normal. Normal people don't blow up training grounds. They don't sling out jutsus like they're free. Normal genins don't beat junins. Normal people don't have tailed beasts sealed in them. Normal people haven't done what I've done. They can't do what I can do. People hate me. They're scared of me, but most importantly, the people who want to kill me, to threaten people I care about, they're out there, and you want me to give away my last advantage, my secrets about my capabilities. Just to answer some curiosities by civvies? If I may be so bold, I'm sure that you can do whatever you put your mind to, not to mention the fact that you can earn the trust of more people if you're frank with them. Naruto thought of the bloodline thief. But that's why I made my brothers. Naruto mumbled to himself even more quietly than breathing. I'm not going to fight him alone when the time comes. And besides, Naruto said more loudly to the cage, this village doesn't care for me. Sure, Everyone can say that this village is the cheeriest, but I haven't exactly had much love coming my way. For as long as I've been here, in fact, I can count on one hand how many people care for me here with fingers left over. I've been far better treated in far more places. Why stay here? Is that what you're threatening me with? Either talk, or walk, if that's what I'm forced to. The boy stood up carefully, everyone in the hall watching him. I'm already like a criminal in my own village. I can tell when I'm not wanted. I never have been. So why the hell should I stay? In fact, why the fuck am I here in this inquiry? You're overstepping, Uzumaki, Homura said harshly, though he was looking at the Hokage. And Hokage-sama, how can you allow him to speak with such impunity? Mark my words, everything he says will be returned to his own head. But this is not a trial. This is an inquiry. What alarms me, however, is that Naruto does not know why he is here. He sees it as us prying into his business. It is actually the contrary. The Hokage looked up to Naruto, who suddenly felt commanded by the man's presence enough to sit back in his chair as his legs turned to jelly. It is the matter that Naruto has been quite a busy person for much of his life, both inside the village and out. Naruto, he turned from Naruto to the crowd, and back to the Jinchuriki. As you probably suspect, a record is being taken, but what you don't know is that it will be used to answer dangerous questions concerning other villages. There are ambassadors here from other nations currently in the Leaf, and they would like to know why you have been meddling in their villages, scouting for weapons, scouring their information pools and pilfering all manner of knowledge and techniques. We're not here just because you've been keeping secrets. We're all entitled to keep them. We're here because you've been stealing secrets. Secrets? Naruto gawked in confusion. But I haven't been, and I'll have you know, Naruto-kun. His voice became more rigid as he spoke privily with the boy, noticeably so. Should you fail to give proper answers when prompted and become a new Kenin by default, you lose the security that the village has to offer, and you'll be set upon by all the villages that you've offended. This inquiry is not an attack on you. This is for your sake. But if you are so sensitive about the lesser topics, one can only wonder, what are you so eager to hide? What have you been up to? But I haven't. Naruto broke off in thought for a while, his mind racing at miles per second. What the hell is going on? It's my brothers, isn't it? Kyuubi, what have they been doing in other nations? Espionage? Jutsu stealing? Do you know who this makes me look like? It makes me look as bad as the bloodline thief. Oh Kami, why? You're training your ass to beat a guy who's getting stronger by the second, but your own progress is too slow. If it weren't for your advanced Kekai Genkai, your brothers would have you beat in terms of raw power. You know why? Because they've been real ninjas, stealing incredible jutsus from vaults, picking fights with the best and training more intensively with the gravity seal while you've been starting to get cozy. I guess they've been spotted and tagged by descriptions every time they did something notable. It's tied to your name, and they're basically your clones because of their resemblance to you. Hence, since they're you, then you're completely fucked. But I don't know what they've been doing in detail, so how am I supposed to fix this? You're going to have to come completely clean and say who they are and why they did what they did. Or completely disown them and claim that they are their own people, with their own consciences. But the answer's a mixture of both. Boss, Narbare's voice came over the mental link. We've made our choices to do what we did. It means we're also our own people. It was at this point that the manic clone sounded as if he was grinning. It's fine, and besides, you should stay in the village. At least for the sake of that harem you've got growing. Am I right? There was a hail and hearty roar in the mines after this as every T-13 member yelled, "Hi," mentally, making Naruto grin stupidly. Crazy bastards. Naruto thought back. Thanks for that, I got it from you, after all. Naruto nodded to himself, although the Hokage was already suspicious of that this meeting was Brea. Chid by the true subjects of the inquiry, he didn't say anything. They have some sort of telepathy then? Or is he just speaking to the Kyuubi? And if I asked him, would he tell me, even privately? Taking a deep breath, the Uzumaki tried to calm himself. After the inquiry today, a lot of things would be learned today, and he'd be damned if he didn't get something out of it as well. He wasn't just going to give up his secrets to the public, under threat or otherwise. Alright, I'll talk. Good, but since this is an inquiry, I want to know a couple of things too. You want sensitive information, but this village, even you have been hiding things from me. Why the Kyuubi is sealed in me, who my parents were, why I'm being targeted by someone who may or may not be their murderer. I only have suspicions, but I've got nothing concrete. There's nothing recorded that I could get my hands on. No one's been straightforward with me. It's because there's a secret about it, right? If my secrets are going to spill, then you better spill some too. This was a ludicrous demand, and the Hokage told him so. Naruto got a strange glint in his eyes when the man told him this, and right then and there, he realized that the boy had made up his mind to walk of the room, out of the village if he didn't get his own questions answered. Even so, Naruto with his intelligence probably well knew in his mind who his father was at least. Especially given the matter on his birthday, and Haku would most likely tell him when they reunited later. So, you want me to tell the whole village, then? I intended to tell you privately later, the wizened old man said under his breath, though Naruto still heard him. You're going to tell me, but make sure that you speak up loud and clear. I don't care about any consequences. My enemy already knows, so there's no point keeping it from me or anybody else. Your enemy? Stop dodging the issue. I want to know. After a moment of consideration, the Hokage tried to get the boy to change his mind. Your father had and still has powerful enemies. I know that. They could target you and your loved ones. I know, they know, and we can all take care of ourselves. Besides, I'm already being targeted. So that's a lame excuse. Naruto insisted. This enemy of yours might now know, and is playing you so that he can find out. He does know, and the Kyuubi can tell that he does. I just need to find out who my parents were. If I can't even find out that, then only the Hokage himself could have buried a secret that deep that no one could ever find out. For all I've ever done for this village, for all you've never done for me, then the least you can do is tell me who they were. Naruto roared the last, and if I don't get that today, then I'd be better off leaving this village. Has it ever occurred to ask yourself every day, why is Naruto still in the village? I wonder where he's living in the village. Maybe I should visit his apartment, although he could start asking questions about why he's stuck in a miserable place like that. Is he eating properly? Is he even eating? And then we have the damn mobs on a yearly schedule on my birthday. Am I supposed to want to stick around? Are you saying that you'd rather leave? You'd become a Nukenin? Naruto leaned a bit closer to the Hokage, almost staring him down. Let me tell you something about my worst enemy. He flaunts how powerful he is, how he could kill me almost by thinking it. He insists that he's going to kill me, so I should stay alone, and not make any bonds with people. He claims he knows my parents, that he knows how they died, and hints that he was involved. He says that I'm the bane of his existence, and he's going to kill me and everyone I know in the worst way imaginable. Once I'm strong enough, with my abilities, he wants to eat my goddamn brains straight out of my skull. But let me tell you something. He visits me at home. Sometimes, he drops off food for me to eat. He'd wash my dishes, even though he's yelled at me that he's not my caretaker, so I should take care of myself. He's given me jutsu scrolls to teach myself from. Naruto removed his tanto from the scabbard on his back and showed it to the Hokage, who discreetly signaled his anbus to keep them from killing Naruto just because he was drawing a weapon. Everyone was silent, however. He gave me this tanto, and my baton to defend myself with from the villagers who try to make my life miserable. That's my worst enemy. And you know what? He's done a whole lot better than anyone in this village has ever done for me, including you. Hokage-sama, so far as you're concerned, I'm raised on ramen. I only know how to get myself into trouble, and concerning a clone jutsu, you never even taught it to me, and never followed up on anyone who could teach me, if they even wanted to. So if you're trying to scare me into wanting to stay in the village, if you're trying to dissuade me from learning about my parents, hoping that I'd want to share secrets, you got me here in this inquiry, and I'm keeping my mouth shut until I hear it from you that you'll tell me what I want to know. I don't need to remind you, Hokage-sama, Kurenai catcalled. But he's very good at keeping his mouth shut. Very well, you understand the potential consequences. You insist on everyone finding out today instead of findin'. Gee out for yourself privately, you'll have your answers. Provided that we get ours, truthfully, frankly, and nothing omitted. Naruto didn't hesitate, not even for a second. I agree. Are you sure, brat? I mean, you already suspect that the Yondaime is your old man, and you've got plenty of reason to. You don't need to sell out so much just for one guy to tell you, especially in public since it's such a big deal. Everyone knows that I'm a Jinchuriki. Plenty of the higher-ups might know who my father was, and the Iwa Kunoichi only needed a suspicion to attack me because I look like the Yondaime. Finding it out in public is the least, and it guarantees that he'll be honest with me, or he'll lose me, one of the best assets to the village. Besides, it'd be good to make him sweat a little. He's had it coming. Gaki, I think this is foolishness. Just call this off, and find out what you need behind closed doors. Naruto paused. You sound afraid. The Kyuubi trembled inside of the seal. He could tell what Naruto was thinking when the Hokage admitted who his father was. There would be an outburst, and there would probably be someone who would yell about how the Yondaime truly died. He worried that Naruto would find out that it was the beast himself who killed the boy's parents. He thought of Naruto as his closest companion, and he'd been content to pin the blame on Ito. For Ito, he only wanted to anger Naruto so that he'd manifest more abilities to kill him, not unlike the revenge shtick that Sasuke had going on with his elder brother. This plan was a marginal failure, as Naruto knew that the second he manifested all of his abilities, he would be killed, though he'd need all of the abilities to defend himself in case Ito got too impatient. But from the aggressive Kekai Genkai stealing that was going on, it was as if Ito was preparing to defend himself from Naruto. He wanted Naruto to gain all of his abilities which he could then steal, while having enough power to defend himself with. But Ito was never really that bad a person, or had the sort of quality that made a man truly evil. But if Naruto was blinded by hate for the man simply because he cursed his fate in life because of his dead parents, he'd easily transfer that hatred to the Kyuubi once he found out the truth. The only loss in the inquiry would be the only true friend that the Kyuubis had since the Sage of the Six Paths. Only the Kyuubi was aware of this. Kurama was afraid. I swear I'll speak with candor. Naruto started to speak again. And the Hokage will honor that by informing me about the identity and fate of my parents. I do so swear, the Hokage agreed. Homura, resumed the inquiry. Right, Uzumaki Naruto, do you have a dojutsu? At this moment, it was as if everyone in the hall leaned forward. As if this would help them to hear more clearly. Naruto sighed tiredly, and psyched himself up. This was only the first of many secrets he'd promised to shed. I do, with his answer in the affirmative. There was now a lot of hushed whispering in the hall before Homura pressed on. Well, what is it? Sharingan? Byakugan? Neither. I'm not sure what the name is, but according to the label on my forehead, I think it's called Insight. Whenever I use it, my IQ for battle rises. It also highlights things of interest in my environment, such as something that's out of place, seeing through illusions, and the like. Quote, sounds useful. May we see it? Acquiescing to his request, the Uzumaki activated his Kekai Genkai, allowing for any and everyone to see the black and white cartwheel design of his eyes. Though slightly unnerving, Homura asked for him to elaborate on the rest of his abilities, which Naruto divulged. The boy hated hearing the whispers now that everyone was now involved in, wondering if the boy had obtained the jutsu by some obscure means. It wasn't even funny how he was unwilling to share, but he did so regardless, though he could easily sense that the Hokage wanted to catch him lying. Something tells me that you really don't want to tell me who my two-san is, old man. I care not for Kekai Genkais, but I think we've made him reveal enough about his bloodline limit. I have my own questions, Maeda declared. Shoot, Naruto said. You were the one picking fights with criminals during the economic crisis some years ago, weren't you? That gray bandana around your neck has a resemblance to the mask that the Maverick was using. Naruto pulled up the mask over his face to show everyone, before dropping it again. Yeah, it was me. The civilian aspect of the inquiry lapsed into chaos immediately. It was a troubling thought, finding out that one of the darker times in the Leaf's history was being cleared by the pariah of the village infighting was common and even ninjas were resorting to stealing from one another. We didn't have the Uchihas to police the village anymore, so why did you do any of it? Trying to be some sort of hero? The man's tone was uncharacteristically sharp, and Naruto heard a small accusation hidden in it. No, I wasn't trying to be a hero. In fact, it would have been better off financially if I had kept out of it. My weekly stipend in those times actually allowed me to eat better food than I was used to. I only went out and fought so that I could train, but after a while, I liked doing it. I don't know why, though. It just felt right. Quote, it is a rather atrocious-looking mask. I recalled seeing and hearing about it often after Tenten, one of my current students, disappeared. I assumed that you had something to do with that. I did. She was about to be killed by land grabbers, and I saved her. Afterwards, I cared for her until she came to live in the orphanage. Is that all? I have no further questions. Guy smiled, however, and it made Naruto leery. Perhaps he'd known the answers to his questions all along, and was trying to make Naruto look better in the eyes of the village. It didn't matter much, though he looked a bit whiter. All he'd really done was make his position even more of a hot topic with the civilians. They had thought his presence was like a sort of mysterious wraith. And to find out that the Jinchuriki was the one that had helped him, though not for completely selfless reasons, was mortifying. Trying to ignore them, Homura went on to ask Naruto to answer rumors that he, Masato and a beggar fell into a coma at the same time for no explained reason. I fell into a coma because I had a pair of clones constantly reading in Konoha's library. They've been reading from it ever since I became a ninja. After they finished reading the entire library, they dispelled, and all the knowledge that they returned from me had such a powerful backlash that it knocked me out. That's an understatement. Anyone who's a user of Kage Bunshins knows that using them like that is suicidal. It's a peculiarity that you're still alive, much less not reduced to a driveling husk. I think we can all agree by this point that I'm not exactly normal. Most of the ninja faction laughed internally at his good humor, even Homura himself, but a civilian got up and yelled at him. Hen, how come Masato fell into a coma then? And some no-name beggar? Isn't it obvious? Naruto raised his eyebrow at the man's stupidity. They're my clones. An outraged-sounding murmur arose, and the Hokage had to call for order before it got out of hand. Of course, he's a clone. It was for selfish reasons, but it's not as if a normal person would let me join the orphanage. Everyone hates me like poison. The orphanage that I grew up in was downright miserable before it got demolished, so I figured I needed someone I could trust to look out for me. At the time, the only person I really trusted was myself. So I made a clone, and transformed him to make him look like an adult. That way, I'd actually have someone in the orphanage who wouldn't kick me out. Most of those on neutral or good terms with the Uzumaki were appalled that he would have to go that far, and actually felt remorse. How come they never noticed that he was that neglected that much? That he was treated that badly? That he had to resort to such outlandish efforts? After thinking about what he said for a while, a Junin encountered a bump in the boy's story. I thought you didn't know how to make clones at the time. It's a special kind of clone. Naruto gritted his teeth. He could see his answer being taken the wrong way, and made a note that the orphanage might need some extra security later. It's not very practical for battle, 'cause it takes too long to make. I made Masato with the Kyuubi's help. So was the beggar. That's absurd. A councilman threw his words like stones. Are we to believe that 50 children have been at the mercies of this brat for this long? That kid? Naruto could hear the hate in the man's voice, and his was like so many others who were against him because of the beast he housed within him. All around he could hear the shouts and the angry questions and tried his best not to let it get to him. But in his efforts to placate them he sold out. Fine, if that's how you like it. Then find another fucking volunteer to take care of 50 kids. Masato will step down, effective immediately. There were largely mixed reactions, mostly positive, though a few others who didn't approve of such a move. Such as those in touch regularly with the orphanage, even the Kage himself. There were laws, but even the old man was willing to bend them. Although he'd thought of Masato as just a normal man before today. He wondered that if somewhere along the way, the clone had developed his own emotional bandwidth, one that cared for the children in the orphanage. He mentally cursed at his decision to make a public inquiry, although it was the only safe way to question Naruto about his actions, the T-13, in other villages without disavowing him completely. Wait, what the hell are you doing? The Kyuubi roared. You can't give these people even an inch. Well, let him have it. We'll see how they manage. If we're done wasting time, let's move on. I'd rather waste my time somewhere else with a better class of people. You heard him. Kurenai shouted to make herself heard. Since we're talking about clones, let's just skip the civilian issues and get to the meat of the matter. We want to know about the T-13. Your so-called brothers. What do you want to know? Naruto feigned ignorance, not about to volunteer information unless they ask specific questions. Are they clones? What's a clone? Are you serious, Uzumaki? Given how much you abuse the technique, you don't have to play dumb. Kurenai had volunteered to ask this question to ease her student into this phase of the inquiry, hoping that he'd use his usually roundabout way of speaking to say as little as possible that would still satisfy the everyone present. A clone is a doppelganger that is created by ninja techniques. But that's not what they are, since the Kyuubi does not know ninja techniques. The bodies are clones of me, sure, but everyone has their own chakra signature, their own mannerisms, characters, hell. Even their internal balance of yin and yang is different. Everyone was silent for a while, trying to process this. Despite their best efforts, all they really heard was that the clones were made differently. What was the point of saying that? I don't follow, Hiyashi said at last. Trying to get past that you're saying they're made differently, why would you explain it like that? Lord Hyuga, Hiruzen said simply, if only you truly understood the phenomenon. It should be impossible to create clones that much differently, but we didn't even realize it with Masato. Perhaps if we were to ask the members of the T-13 who snuck in here to conduct a simple experiment, you'd understand. The members? Guy exclaimed loudly, looking around anxiously, trying to spy them but couldn't. Are they in henges? Where are they? Capitalizing on disguises to look like civilians. Realizing that their covers were already blown, they removed their realistic latex masks to show their faces. Though more or less like Naruto's own, it would appear that there were a few variations like intentional scarring among a couple others with deliberately unique hairstyling and dyeing. Even some with different heights and muscle builds. Naruto counted quickly and saw that they were, in fact, all there present in the room sitting in random places in the civilian section, looking nonchalant as if waiting for something big to happen. They ignored everything, the stares, the whispers, shouted accusations, even Naruto's own commands on the mental link, something that even confused him. So are they just that curious to come in here, or just dumb? A few wondered out loud. Bear with me, the Hokage smiled before looking at the T-13 members. Why don't some of you stand? A few complied with the man's request. Before he asked if one of them would introduce themselves. None did, but he then asked if any of them would wave to him. Pressing on, he ordered all those standing to seat themselves, before ordering them again to move around and exchange seats with one another randomly. After the small stunt, a civilian asked if there was a point in that inane exercise. Oh, but there was. Naruto has not made clones. From what he said, they basically only look similar to him, but are different otherwise, even as far as acting independently of one another and choosing when, if and how to follow instructions. Naruto has created people. You cannot be serious. Asuma's voice rose above the din. They're clones. Oi, the short-tempered Narsense growled from behind Asuma, making the man straighten as he looked to face him. If you've got something to say about us, stand up and say it to my face, you fucking cunt. Asuma ignored his insult and turned to Kurenai, who was seated beside him. I take it back, this guy is not like Naruto. I'd like to apologize for my brother's behavior, Narshaku started to say, before he was interrupted by Doc, who ordered everyone to keep quiet. Well, isn't this something? Hitomi marveled. It's not just that they're people. He actually created life. Manipulating the creation of yin and yang is nothing short of astounding. There were a few others who agreed with her. There were yet others who were still in disbelief that a dozen rogues had so easily infiltrated the inquiry and raised the issue of whether or now the building was so secure after all. Of course the building is secure, the Hokage affirmed. I knew that they'd come uninvited out of curiosity and who knows what else, and I allowed them to come inside just so that you could see them for yourselves. Unfortunately, since this means that they are their own people, capable of their decisions, it means that they were never members of the Hidden Leaf. And they're nothing more than ninjas who grew up outside of the hidden villages. Is this a disavowal? Naruto asked. It is, the Hokage replied, knowing that this disavowal would exonera Naruto of any accusations that he was operating in other villages. They're not of Konoha, and the other villages cannot hold Naruto responsible for their actions. Anbu, have them arrested and prepared for extradition. Getting extradited was no one's idea of fun, and it was no surprise to see the T-13 members make a mad dash for the exit with Anbu's in hot pursuit. There were a few in the hall who found this situation laughable, and even Shibi Aburame was spied smirking in amusement under his collar. Seeing this as his chance to be rid of the bulk of civilians, Hitomi formally requested to T. Hokage that all the civilians be removed from the inquiry, lest there be other spies who snuck in and was hiding amongst them. A great cry arose from them. They all wanted to stay, of course, and most of them lambasted the Hyuga for even thinking of making such a suggestion. While the Cage was pretending to think it over, he wasn't about to waste this opportunity. One civilian stood up out of her seat. All eyes turned to Mebuki Haruno. It was at this moment that everyone present realized that she had been the most, uncharacteristically, quiet during the entire inquiry. It wouldn't be fair to say that she would, as she normally was, be the loudest person there, and making it blatant of how much she disliked the Uzumaki. Naruto looked up at the woman, but found himself almost unable to look her in the eyes. He had an idea of what she wanted to know, and was suddenly afraid of how he might, or might not be able to answer. "I'm more than willing to leave," she said, "but I'd like to ask Uzumaki a question first." She hesitated at this moment, and Naruto was unable to take the silence in stride, staring at the woman who looked like she had been grieving non-stop for the past few days. His nervousness grew, and the lad started blustering in answer and couldn't stop. Look ma'am, I'm sorry about your daughter. I know we were never really friends and I don't approve that. She died and I'm sorry that she did, and I can tell you that Fu-chan wasn't targeting her specifically." He paused for breath and kept on. "But it's the Chunin exams and deaths are common, and it kinda shows that she wasn't ready for it. And I don't really blame Fu-chan, because in conflicts like that, it's usually you or your enemy that walks away from a fight, and again I am really sorry that Sakura's dead, Haruno-sama. I always hated you," Mebuyuki said matter-of-factly, yet her tone was so calm that Naruto was thrown for a loop. He had expected her to yell at him, perhaps would have preferred it, but she was speaking evenly. "I hated you," she said again, "and everyone here knows why, including you. In fact, I'm sure that almost everyone here hates you. We all know why, but the second thing is, why do we hate you? The Kyuubi's been identified as its own entity inside you, and you've confessed that you're close to it, like a friend of sorts. I'm still not so sure why you'd cozy up to the creature we hate you for, because it killed so many people, leveled the village and indirectly caused an economic recession, but I digress. It's just that Sakura came back from the B-ranked mission with everyone from her generation. And she came back with a lot of questions. She knows that I keep up to date with current affairs in the village, and she started asking me if I knew you had a dojutsu. Asked if you belonged to a clan and things like that." The inquiry was silent. I didn't answer, because I didn't know anything. When I brushed her off, Sakura asked me what she said she was wondering for years now. She asked me why I hated you. I couldn't tell her, and being who she was, decided to go looking for answers somewhere else. While you were comatose, she started digging for information, and people kept telling me that she was grinding them for things she shouldn't know about. Eventually, she brought home enough books to lose herself in, and from the titles, I could tell that she was going to find out what we were all keeping secret. Researching how tailed beasts respawn a few years after being killed, about how no one spotted the Kyuubi for 14 years, finding out your birthday was the day it disappeared. Learning that the Yondaime was a sealing master and it's a frequent practice of making jinchurikis. Eventually, she just pieced it together. At this, a few civilians started chewing out the woman for not stopping her daughter from doing information digging like this, or for being a negligent parent, but the woman ignored them, trying to gather her bearings as if the next part was disturbing. She went on, "I was standing behind my daughter when she was reading, and I was there when she finished. I could practically feel her tense up as she finally began to see how everything fitted, and then all she said was, 'Oh, that's why,' as if it wasn't even important. 'Oh, that's why.' I've seen Sakura overreact just for having a loose thread in her outfit. When my daughter," a lone tear ran down the woman's cheek. She was still trying to come to grips that Sakura was dead. But when she found out that Naruto was the Jinchuriki for the Kyuubi, she carried on as if there was nothing wrong. She didn't hate him at all. Nothing really changed. She didn't talk to me about him anymore though, and I couldn't really blame her. But I had to ask myself, why did I hate Naruto? There was a bit of hesitation in the crowd as most people tried to think of a good answer, but decided against it since there was no way of saying it without potentially pissing off the Hokage. Naruto was the one who broke the silence, and asked his own query. "I understand what you mean, but what's the question that you wanted to ask me?" "The question? Do you hate us, Naruto?" Naruto flinched. "That's kinda vague. Who are you talking about?" "You know who I mean. I'm talking about every one of us who hate you, whether we show it or do it discreetly." "That's a hard question," Naruto retorted. It was true, as he had no idea how to answer, and still had no clue of how to get out of answering it. The Hokage saw this as a moment of weakness for Naruto, and wondered that this might be the way that would make Naruto fail his end of the bargain in order to hear the identity of his parents in the inquiry. He wasn't vindictive, but he'd rather tell the boy in private. But this was not to be, as Naruto struggled to make his response. Hate you? I despise the lot of you. That's a no-brainer. I mean, I hate you all so much that I ran away to another country. I hate you so much that I intentionally lost almost all of my memories of the villagers nearly killing me so I could actually sleep at night. I hate you all so much that it's a battle to get out of my house and force myself to mingle with you. And pretend like there's nothing wrong. To pretend that I don't see people giving me bad looks. To pretend that I don't hear anyone bad-mouthing me behind my back. I just have to act like I'm okay. But I'm not. His answer was somewhat expected, but he wasn't done yet. If two mirrors are held up to one another, which one is showing the reflection of the other? We both hate each other. And nothing's gonna change if we don't stop hating each other. You hate me for no good reason, and I hate you for no good reason. Sometimes, I can't cope at all, and the Kyuubi would joke and say, damn. When I went on that rampage, I must have fucking missed every bad person when I destroyed the village. He then asked me to let him out and try again, and I joke back and tell him, no, you might miss again. And it would help me realize that not everyone in this village hates me. I have people who care for me in the village too. That was the Kyuubi's way of reminding me of that. Naruto stood up out of his seat and faced Mebuki unflinchingly as his answer continued. I'm just as petty as everyone else in the village. So here's my response to your question. I don't hate the village. Mebuki gave the boy a lopsided look at the almost confusing response, but it was easy to understand after a moment or two. Naruto loved the village, and only disliked those who disliked him for being a Jinchuriki. He wasn't a better man for ignoring their hate, or foolish for loving them when they didn't love him. He even went on to say that those who hated him can kiss his ass. You shouldn't swear so much, Uzumaki. It doesn't suit you. With that said, the woman turned on her heel and made her way to the exit, leaving a gaping quiet in her wake. Almost everyone surprised at the turn of events, and it was a reminder from Hiashi again that the inquiry be purged of civilians once more. Seeing that their main bolster to keep them in the inquiry was gone, the civvies largely left without protest, and soon only the ninjas remained, such as those who were interested in the inquiry, were clan heads, and the elites who were obligated to be present. The boy sitting next to the Hokage suddenly started breathing in deep breaths, now realizing that he was now more relaxed, seeing that the room's few familiar faces were now all easily seen, and the judgmental civilians were now all gone. Well, glad that part's over. You would think so, wouldn't you? Kakashi remarked. But I still have my own questions, one of which still involves Sakura. I still would like to know, how you're so familiar with Fu of Tokigakure. We're friends. Since when? Since I was suspended from ninja duties, Naruto said most reluctantly. Not completely comprehending, Kakashi narrowed his lone eye in a stare. I don't understand. Elaborate. I never came back home immediately after the mission in Kimyo Town. I stayed behind to create the T-13, and then later on when we went to train close to Taki. That was where I met Fu. Whoa, so Uzumaki was never disciplined for his insubordination? A Junin asked the rhetoric. And he was even AWOL, too? There was a clamoring no. As ninjas were now quarreling over what he did, whether or not it was justified, if the T-13 members who were created were better off created in the end or not. We wouldn't have survived Wave if the T-13 members hadn't shown up. If you ask me, I'm actually glad that my student disobeyed instructions, Kurenai argued. Another one yelled at her for not being proficient enough then, before Yuhi show. Ted back that they had to fight Momochi Zabuza. Insubordination is insubordination. To make it worse, he was insubordinate by not taking his punishment. That kid has no sense of duty, or code. You know, since we're talking about punishment, Naruto called above the noise at the Junin who seemed to oppose him the most. The inquiry started. Let's talk about yours. You know how long you should get to stay in prison for rape? Rape? The Junin asked, his eyebrows nearly lifting off of his face in surprise and mild horror. What the hell are you talking about, brat? I remember a particular night during the economic recession when I was rooftop running in my district. I heard something like someone who was screaming, but it was muffled. When I came to look to see what the matter was about, I saw you balls deep in a woman who really looked like she wasn't having a good time. Probably because you were half choking her to get her to keep quiet. You ran away when you saw me coming. Naruto paused when he heard a snicker coming from Enko, and the boy scratched his chin sheepishly. Okay, that last part was a poor choice of words. But the point is that since we're talking about punishment this and punishment that, we might as well all be honest, no? The Junin stood up, so infuriated that his nostrils were flaring. I did no such thing, brat. I've got an eidetic memory. That's what you're forgetting. And if you've got nothing to hide, I'm sure a very talented mind reader from the Yamanaka clan can just clear that up for everyone, am I right? Naruto was nothing if not vengeful and vindictive, the Hokage decided. Directing that the Junin submit himself for questioning after the inquiry was over, the Junin sat back down, noticeably trembling every now and again. After everyone collected themselves, now worrying that Naruto had dirt on everyone in the village, Kurenai stood up to make her own claim. I offer to discipline Uzumaki myself, Hokage-sama. Are you able? Hiruzen inquired. I am. Very well. Deal with your student as you see fit. Should he ever be insubordinate in the future, it'll cost both your ninja careers. Am I understood? Hi, Hokage-sama. Naruto glanced at the cage next to him, then back at his sensei, suddenly wondering when his teacher began to care that much about him. Being one to look a gift horse in the mouth, he decided to ask her about it later. But he was shaken from his musings when he noticed that Enko was staring at him intensely. What is it, Enko-san? Put on your mask, then your hoodie, then stand sideways to me, she ordered. Not sure why, he fulfilled her strange request, making the woman suck breath in sharply through her teeth. Holy crap, I didn't see it before. You look just like him. Just like who? Some guy who I fought earlier. Enko, the Hokage suddenly shouted, something that was so uncharacteristic of the old man that it shut Enko up immediately. Don't say any more. Almost frightened into submission, the woman acquiesced, piquing everyone's interest. Although nothing more was said, it was still enough for Naruto to understand. He turned to the man beside him, and did all that he could do to keep from glaring hotly. I see, you mean my enemy, so you're keeping him secret. I thought as much, since that guy's always on pins on needles when he's in the village. Who's the bloodline thief, Hokage-sama? The man's eyes were shadowed as he bowed his head. Naruto knew to leave damn well enough alone, but he persisted. He was sick and tired of all the secrets and the lies. This is an inquiry, right? We're all here for some truth, right? Who the hell is Ito? Almost instantly, Anbus from every nook and cranny came out of their hiding places, all in a beeline for Naruto. His reflex ability blaring in his mind, he withdrew his tanto to defend himself from a kunai that would have carved him up like a slab of meat, while kicking at another Anbu that attacked him from behind, flawlessly creating 2 cage bunshins. His dojutsu then flared up as he prepared to fight them all. But at the Hokage's words to take him into custody, the Anbus began to grab onto his limbs, securing him tightly. No, goddammit, let go of me, Naruto bellowed at the top of his lungs as the ninjas began to carry him away. The members of the inquiry could only watch dumbstruck as the Uzumaki was seemingly arrested just for mentioning a name. Most of the older ones were shocked that Naruto even knew that name, but could do nothing but stare as Naruto continued to yell himself hoarse. This isn't fair, old man. You lied, I did what you fucking asked. Naruto screamed as tears began to stream down his face, struggling to wrench himself free from the dozen Anbus who held onto him. You didn't even tell me who my parents are. You liar, you fucking liar, Naruto shouted at the top of his lungs, an utter vulgarity against the Hokage. Deciding that he'd done enough damage to both himself and the Hokage, an Anbu knocked him unconscious with a sharp cuff to the back of his head, making it snap back. As they carried away his limp body, the Hokage followed soon afterwards. The remaining members in the inquiry had to follow suit. It was all over. In all things realized, all the inquiry did was to raise more questions than give answers to those who sought them. All that was left to do was to leave, and the last to do so was the black sheep himself, who was disguised as a ninja present for the inquiry. Well, damn, I guess Toussaint really doesn't want anyone to know about me, huh? Ito grumbled to himself, before walking out. Damn, this inquiry was just one big waste of time. I was hoping to see everyone's reaction to hearing about the Yondaime being the kid's father. Upon his exit, he had to shield his eyes against the sun, and looked at the crowd outside who were still discussing the events of the inquiry, and the mysteries surrounding it. Never really did like old man Sarutobi, he grumbled as he wondered what his next move should be. Shut up, I said. You didn't shut up. Keep your mouth shut, I said. You didn't keep your mouth shut. When Naruto first came to, He had a feeling that the Kyuubi was going to be an insufferable dick about what had happened to him. He didn't even have his eyes open for a full 3 seconds before the beast started to rip into him. Just couldn't keep your mouth shut, huh? I mean, of all the goddamn containers in all the hidden villages, I get the one with the biggest mouth. Damn, this kind of shit makes me feel like my life is a work of fiction sometimes. Naruto was silent for a few minutes, trying to gather his bearings. After gritting against the pain of his headache that gradually faded as he focused his attention on his situation, such as how he was tied securely to a chair he was in, seated all alone in a pitch-black room, he came up with his eloquent answer. Piss off. Kurama didn't give the boy a reply, and merely settled for steaming inside the seal, still angry at his container for behaving so rashly. Naruto didn't care much, as something started to bother him ever since he had started to suspect his best friend during the inquiry. The way you kept trying to get me to shut up, it wasn't because of this blasted mess I'm now in. You were afraid of something else. Sure, I was afraid that we old have gotten ourselves mobbed and lynched. Guess this isn't too far off, huh brat? Still thanking the Shinigami that your head hasn't rolled yet. Naruto became annoyed at this, even more than he already was because of his current predicament. The Kyuubi hadn't called him a brat in quite a while, which had signified that the Kyuubi had acknowledged the fact that he had grown. To hear him regress back into this came as a blow to the Uzumaki's pride, but did little to alter his level of indignation. Kurama, Naruto said aloud, his already sour expression darkening. Who killed my parents? Ito did. You know this already. You said you had no fucking idea who killed your parents. I remember you saying that perfectly. Then, suddenly after Ito says that he might have killed my parents, you were suddenly telling me that he's the one who killed my parents. Why's that? Naruto asked quietly. For a moment, the Kyuubi cursed to himself, suddenly hating the fact that Naruto had an eidetic memory. For minutes, hours, Naruto sat in the chair in the darkness, waiting for an answer to his rhetorical question. The truth was right there in front of him, but he refused to acknowledge it. He didn't want to. Yet, the reasons behind the events in his head continued to form in his head. Ito, while trying to inveigle anger in Naruto against him, acted as if he had murdered his parents, but Naruto wasn't sure if this was true or not. The Kyuubi claimed to not know their fate, and remembered what happened to them only after Ito had confessed. There were a few things that hinged on the Kyuubi's behavior, and Naruto made his observations. Either you want me to be angry at this son of a bitch for your own reasons, or you're playing along with his lies because you were the one who killed my parents. Naruto's voice was poisonous. And why would I do something like that? I dunno, Naruto said sarcastically. Maybe you're afraid of pissing off your Jinchuriki who can torture you inside the seal. Especially when that Jinchuriki hates how he grew up alone. Maybe it's the reason you've been so helpful ever since you realized that Jinchuriki's got a mean streak when it concerns his parents. Not because you and your Jinchuriki are pals, but because you're afraid of him. That's bullshit, the Kyuubi said. It's not true. You being afraid, or lying? Both, the Kyuubi insisted. And you know it's true. Besides, if that was the case, I never would have tried to talk to you when you were 6. We're friends. I can't argue with that. Naruto agreed as he fidgeted against the tight bonds holding him to his chair. But you didn't know that I would be who I am now. Either Ito or the both of you wants me to be angry at that bastard for killing my parents, and whoever's responsible. I hope they know that I've been training ever since then to kill them. I've been training, put aside a whole lot of things, distanced myself from a lot of people, even formed a team of clones just so I could avenge my parents. I hope they know that. Yeah, the Kyuubi felt a sense of foreboding. I hope so too. At long last, the lights came on in the small room he was in, and Naruto prepared himself. As soon as the knocks came at the door, it was opened, admitting entrance to the girl who had no qualms about entering the house as if she owned it. Naruto-kun, you here? Naruto-kun? At least with some sense of decorum. Tenten closed the front door before continuing further inside, after hearing some talk and low noise coming from elsewhere in the house. She moved off in search of it, only to find what looked like a mob of Narutos all seated in the kitchen or standing around all engrossed in conversation and argument. It was only after entering the doorway that they took note of her presence. But one of them had seemed to have been watching the doorway, as if expecting her to walk through it. Hey, he said gruffly. Grab a seat. Looking around briefly, he took note of the fact that there were no spare chairs, and roughly ordered one of his brothers to give up theirs. It unnerved the girl to see the brothers, now without their masks, and although they all looked markedly different from one another, they still bore too much resemblance to the original Naruto, like members of a clan would. Telling the short-tempered censor that he didn't need to swear so much. Narsensa frowned and down his nose at her. "I'll fucking talk any way I want, you clapped cunt." "Guess that's a no," Tenten mumbled, deciding that arguing with him wasn't worth the trouble. How can they look so similar and basically be clones, but all of them act so differently? Masato came to mind again, and Tenten slightly cringed with the knowledge that a clone of Naruto had been in control of the orphanage she had been in for all of 4 years. After a lull in the argument the boys seemed to be having amongst themselves, a bowl of ramen was placed before her on the kitchen table, along with a pair of chopsticks and a spoon, just for her to choose the utensil she favored more. This hardly garnered her attention so much as the soup, and after watching everyone else start to partake of theirs, she frowned. "What's wrong?" Narsensa asked in his unfriendly tone. "Afraid of poison?" "No, just remembering how the orphanage used to get ramen delivered by the Ichirakus. Some anonymous person kept buying 20 bowls or so for us on special occasions. I'm guessing since all of you are basically Naruto, you all love ramen?" "I don't eat shit that I didn't make myself," Narsensa said even more crossly. "But I don't give a rat's ass what you do or think of the food." "Please forgive my brother," Narshaku said brightly. He inadvertently became the most short-tempered when he was created. After being yelled at by the sensory clone, the meek ration user fell quiet, making Tenten laugh. "I guess you're all different too, I guess." "Damn right, we are." Psychosis cheered. "It was a grand occasion. About an hour ago we just got declared to be our own people. Anyone who calls us clones gets to lose their front teeth." The Higurashi sweat dropped at this, but after a while of Saint airing at the sensory clone, who was apparently the cook for the team, decided to stay on his good side by eating what she was offered, and her eyes widened in surprise, finding the food even tastier than she had expected it to be. "Holy crap, what did you put in this?" "Oh, it's love," he said brightly, though his false smile faded as quickly as it came. "It was seasonings. What did you think it was?" Soon, he had to be calmed down by Psychosis, and Tenten explained that she only wanted to compliment it. "Fine, I don't care. You guys really act so differently from Naruto. Maybe you should be considered your own people." Tenten resumed eating, and one of the T13 members had to ask her why she looked crestfallen, asking if it was because she hadn't found a place to live yet. One of them EV.N suggested that Naruto had 3 bedrooms in his house. "I just started looking," Tenten snapped. "I'll soon move out of the orphanage. I know it's not our place to say, but..." Psychosis decided to just be frank. "Since you just said that we all are our own people, then don't you think Masato is too? Isn't the whole reason why you're leaving there because you're uncomfortable being around him? Because you thought of him like a father when he was just Naruto's clone?" "Yeah, but, don't worry, you won't have to leave." Paishosis bore the scalding pain of the soup and put the bowl to his lips, slurping down the contents quickly before returning his attention to the girl. "He's the one who's leaving. Me and a few of the others were just going over there. We gotta help him pack and leave, like act as his guards and shit. He's leaving the orphanage this afternoon, 'cause Naruto fired him." "What? Why?" Psychosis jested. Seeing her annoyed expression, he hurried on to explain. "I got the memo from the boss mentally. The villagers don't like how he's got a clone running the orphanage. I mean, he's the frickin' Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi for Kami's sake. They could claim that it's because he's a child, but we all know better, and you do too. The sooner he's gone, the better. In another few hours, they might just burn down the orphanage with him inside, whether the children are in there or not. Hey, it's not as if these kids have families, hint hint." She knew why Masato was fired, but still blurted out her rhetoric. "But he's doing a great job of running it." "Why?" "Because he's a clone of the guy who has a monster in him." Narbure was still and always the neurotic one, but still the smartest. "And no one cares what you think, or what we think. What matters is what they think, even if they aren't thinking at all. And now in retrospect, it wouldn't hurt to have a ninja staying in the orphanage, you know, in case the villagers don't forget about Masato being in the orphanage in the first place." He gave her a pointed look and she took the hint easily. "This shouldn't bother you since you were leaving because of Masato being there. It was either him or you, right?" Narbure had a strange glint in his eyes, as if he was judging the girl for being biased against the clone who had taken care of her for years. He was in fact displeased, and Tenten could feel the animosity. Whether she was a censor for people's emotions or not, they were all pissed at her for her mentality, and there was only one way to save face. "All right, I'll come." Tenten uneasily drank the rest of her soup, wondering how she got into this mess. At the back of her mind, however, she wondered if she helped cause it. Even worse, she could have accidentally been on the side of the village instead of Naruto's. For a long moment, she thought of Masato as really having a character of his own, and wondered how he felt. Just like the rest of these guys, he's basically like Naruto, but not the same guy. Maybe I was wrong. No time to waste. Let's go, Narbure ordered. Looking back at the rest of the T-13, he wondered who he should bring along with him. "Oh, right, I need a few of you to come with me. Any volunteers? I need a show of hands." Nearly everyone raised their hands. The Hokage likes us, so I don't want anyone killing any civvies. Purposefully, or any of that. Whoops, that was an accident. Bullshit. Most of the hands dropped. We're going to intimidate people to avoid a conflict, not start a conflict. You know, not unless he shows up. So if you know that you love to brawl, put your hands down. More hands dropped. Psychosis looked over at Narshaku with a cold stare, one of the few who still had their hands up. "I'm sorry bro, but I don't want any doormats coming with me." The clone, knowing of his meek attitude, dropped his hand in shame. Seeing that only Naruto, the team's blacksmith and Narcase, the wind specialist were the only ones still willing, the de facto leader of the Tenacious 13 gave a small nod, and gestured them to follow him. "All right, let's go." Beckoning the Higurashi and his two brothers to follow him, they left Naruto's house. Although walking in plain sight, they weren't noticed by the villagers as being an external source that was ousted as criminals just a few hours ago by the inquiry. It took a few minutes before Tenten saw the brothers from another civilian's perspective, only to realize that they were using a mild genjutsu to hide themselves, giving them different civilian-like appearances. Genjutsu? People believe in what they want to believe. Even when it's fake, Psychosis drawled. Everyone sees us as something else, like a colorless drawing. With a genjutsu like mine, by the time everything's said and done, no one will be able to agree on what they saw. That's impressive. Thanks. Took me a while to perfect it, and I'm proud of it. Not all of us can be powerhouses. Powerhouses? Psychosis nodded. It's almost been like a pissing contest these past few months. Half a dozen of us mastered a ranked jutsus, another few of us perfected taijutsus, another one learned how to completely hide his presence. And you still have quite a few of us who decided to steal jutsus and special weapons. I understand that you want to get stronger, but why? You make it sound like you have a deadline? What's going on? We were basically made to get as powerful as possible before we disperse, Narcase said shortly, as he discreetly caused a small puff of wind to blow up a civilian woman's skirt as he passed her. With a chortle, he returned his attention to Tenten as if his perverted prank was just a passing fancy. The boss probably got attached to us. Or maybe we just need to get more powerful before it happens. Who knows? I'd sure like to live, but I wasn't naturally born. I sure as hell don't get to naturally die, either. But we're only training to help the boss to kill someone really powerful. That made sense, Tenten thought, although something didn't quite add up. Me and the others fought you in the hospital. You guys are plenty strong already. Isn't Masato strong too? Why would you need to guard him? They all shook their heads in response, making the girl confused. The Kyuubi was the one who made that clone for boss, Naruto grumbled. Made him to be a weakling. The two of them basically made a civilian. 'Cause only someone with the appearance and chakra level of a civvy could qualify, you know? Been alive for a total of 4 years, but he's a man with the cloned mind of a kid. And had to grow up in a matter of hours. Honestly, most of us feel sorry for him. Can't imagine being powerless. Can't imagine having to be forced with a responsibility like that, either. Especially since he failed his one reason to exist. Epic fail. Fail? If the reason that you're born doesn't happen, Psychosis explained, that is, him being made so that Naruto could stay in the orphanage with an adult he can trust, then he failed. His mission failed, and he didn't really have a reason to exist. Failed from day one, but had to live with that failure for 4 years, still without a purpose. Now, he's getting booted out of the orphanage. This made Tenten falter a little in step, but soon picked up the pace. But he could have left at any time? Dispersed at any time? Probably, but he didn't. So we're assuming the fella wants to live. Where will he go? I don't have all the answers, Psychosis said shortly, before pointing at the orphanage just up ahead, along with the huge crowd gathered in front of it. We're here. I'm dropping the genjutsu. Hold up, Tenten interrupted. Can't you just hide Masato in this genjutsu? Make things easier? Oh, you mean hide the guy that they all expect to see leave? And if the guy they want to kill doesn't leave the orphanage in a way that they can see him, what do you think they'll do next? Naruto glared at the girl throughout his rhetoric, making her cringe in realization that her input was foolish. Look, if you're here to help, then help. If not, then go be useless somewhere else. Alright, geez, don't jump down my throat. I just didn't think that part through. Already annoyed by some of the clones' behaviors, she eagerly broke rank with them to make her way through the crowd of civilians, who were in a demonstration against Masato. It was in reality the same old anti-Kyuubi recurring nonsense, and she would have rolled her eyes if it wasn't so serious this time. There was a difference between knowing at Naruto could easily beat them down or evade them, versus knowing that it was her home they were threatening, along with some out-of-touch clone who didn't have a purpose. He reminded her of how she felt useless in Kimyo Town, but that was as far as that went, besides the fact that he was her surrogate father for 4 years. Oh, dear Kami, Naruto was her surrogate father. Things were horrible, when they were boiled down to their basics. Things were going sour even before they had arrived. All sorts of garbage and rocks were being chucked at the orphanage. In this case, it was a bit conscientious of the crowd to aim at the part of the building where Misato's room was, breaking out his windows and likely harming whoever happened to be in the room. Already working on crowd control, Narcase deliberately tried to get their attention by loudly calling out his jutsu while exaggerating his hand seals, blowing a datapa powerful enough to send people sprawling backwards if they were clumsy enough. Knock it off, assholes. There's the demon brat. I thought he got arrested at the inquiry? A man yelled. There were soon shouts that it was in fact one of the demonic clones made by the brat in question. But that only served to make the crowd more incited to violence. Elsewhere, Naruto was using his telescope baton and breaking a kneecap, and Psychosis broke out another civilian's teeth with a right hook. Tenten gaped at their actions, before the neurotic clone noticed her expression and grinned maniacally, yelling "riot control" at the tops of his lungs happily. Ah, don't worry about it. We got declared by the Hokage to be our own people. Naruto ain't getting the consequences of our actions. Elsewhere, a rather androgynous-looking boy tried to hit Psychosis with a 2x4 block of wood. And Psychosis grabbed the weapon from the teen before it him, smashing it into his jaw. Psychosis then kicked the girlish-looking boy away, screaming in pain as he went. Scram, you fucking trap. Despite the crowd being so easily handled, it lit a fire in them to fully act, and soon, Molotovs were being thrown, along with people arming themselves with everyday tools and cutlery. Turning back to Tenten with a sweat drop in realization that he had made things worse, he urged her to fetch Masato as soon as possible. Obliging him, the girl ran into her home and bolted the door behind her. Looking around in the front room she was now in, she was shocked to see that the room was packed with almost every boy and girl in the orphanage. Sitting on nearly every flat piece of furniture, on the ground. Even the younger ones in the bigger children's laps, even standing where there was no more room. 49 children in the orphanage besides Tenten herself, plus one. That one being Masato, seated on a small stool in the middle of the room with a suitcase by his side, surrounded by the children he'd been taking care of for 4 years. When she came in, everyone glanced to her being the most distracting, and Tenten held their attention as she spoke to the man. Hey, Naruto-kun, I mean Masato. Seeing him look down when she said his creator's name, his head dropped, and the girl became flustered. Sorry, you know what I mean. It's alright, doesn't really matter. I'm basically the same guy, right? He gave her a pointed look. Isn't that why you're moving out? You don't need to bother, since I'm leaving. Would everyone just shut up about that? Tenten yelled suddenly, before suddenly remembering her place. She didn't apologize though. Ever since this crap started, everyone's treating me as if I'm the bad guy or something. Is it wrong to want to leave the same house that my crush's clone is acting like my father in this orphanage? Do you have any idea how sick that is? I wasn't saying anything about that. I was just about to ask you a favor, Masato replied, noticeably in a hurt tone. What? Tenten demanded. It's just that I know that you're not the oldest by a year or two. But you're the only one with ninja training. I know that you're itching to leave, find somewhere of your own to live, But I'd really appreciate it if you took care of everyone here. Some other adult will come to replace you. Besides, you can't possibly ask me to. It doesn't matter what the adults are like. But you know what it's like to be an orphan, just like everyone else. That's also why I'm asking, so please. She noticed what looked like tears in his eyes, and with his round face, Tenten wondered if this would be what Naruto would look like if she could see him cry. Don't make me beg. Why would you care so much? You were just made to look after Naruto when he came to the orphanage. But he didn't stay, and I did. He looked around at the room still filled with the silent orphans. I stayed, when I could have walked out at any time. The Higurashi caught on easily to what he was saying. He'd come to care about the orphans too. With a bare yes, she agreed to his request, not knowing why she was taking on such a sheer responsibility, but did so in great faith. I will, thanks, I mean it. Things became silent in the room, save for the sounds of fighting and yells going on outside. Before Tenten could remind Masato again that he needed to leave, a 10-year-old girl piped up and asked Tenten who Naruto was. He's my best friend, Tenten answered after a few seconds of consideration. You said that he's your crush. Another child chirruped. A chorus of oohs rose up, making Tenten blush a little. Can we not talk about this right now? I like him, the first girl exclaimed. If he's like Masato, he must be a good guy. There were airs of agreement from the children, and a small discussion started up about how he was the one sending them meals on occasion and small donations and whatnot. However, Asami spoiled it by mentioning that he was hated in the village. A few of the older orphans mentioned hearing about things like this too. And everyone was starting to get worked up. But why? Masato wouldn't answer the general question, but at great risk to herself, Tenten volunteered to tell, even when Masato warned her not to. I don't care, maybe they should know. Quote, know what? Naruto's a just think of a house. Tenten decided to dumb things down. Imagine that a monster was living in that house. Then, think of a person who is that house. So you're saying that a monster is living inside Naruto? A boy asked plainly. That's weird. I've seen you keep weapons in your scroll, but this is pretty hard to understand. But it's the same thing. Tenten eagerly went on to explain. That's why when the village found out that Masato is a clone of Naruto-kun, they want him to leave. They don't like Naruto, and that's why. Naruto built the orphanage so that he could come live here. Hearing begging questions for why, Tenten decided to just get it out of the way. He lives like dirt, so he got the orphanage built so that he and I could live here. But he knew that no one running the orphanage would want to take care of him, so he made Masato. But when most of you from back then took up all the spots available, eggs. PT for just 2 more by the time he carried me here. When it was time for us to get registered, he felt sorry for crybaby Asami, and gave up his spot. I'm not a crybaby, Asami shouted, though he went ignored. I don't want Masato to leave. A girl started to cry. Will you stay, Masato? Before the sobbing girl could get her answer, the man somehow disappeared from a sight as a fierce gust of wind blew through the room. And the front door exploded into splinters. While everyone panicked about whatever the hell was transpiring, Tenten ran outside as her sensory abilities started to go haywire. Looking around wildly, her senses finally locked onto the man and spotted him on the roof. Tenten gawked when she saw Masato on his knees, looking as if he was choking to death. Her senses warned her that there was someone dangerous up there beside him, and squinting almost till her eyes shut, she thought that she could now see a man, who was invisible before, all clothed in dark robes and a hood. In fact, she nearly thought that it was Naruto, but the person in question was heavily scarred, and his eyes were a pair of horrific-looking and confused set of black and white swirls. Who the hell is that up there with him? She mused out loud. She yelled at them and, unfortunately, gaining Ito's attention, and stared down at her. Oh, you can see me? The man asked as he pulled out a tanto, heavily covered in seals. Turning his attention back to Masato, who was still being strangled by one hand, he cleaved the man's head in 2 horizontally at the temple with a blurring strike, and EFTLY caught the upper portion of the dead clone's skull. Blood and gore spurted out of slashed head, and Ito allowed the body to drop in a slump. Tenten screamed in horror, drawing the attention of T. He last 3 brothers finally driving off the last of the rioting civilians. Tenten, what's the matter? And where's Masato? Narcase yelled as he got to her first. The still mortified girl pointed up at the roof of the orphanage. But the T-13 member couldn't see anything from his vantage point. Girl, Stop playing games. Narcase fumed. What am I looking at? He's right there, Tenten screamed in his face as Narbare and Naruto ran up to them. Can't you see him? He just killed Masato. Ito merely settled himself to sit on the edge of the roof with his feet dangling over the sides. His free hand was in the skull he was holding, pulverizing the brains inside it. Oh right, forgot that I was still using that one guy's jutsu for pure non-detection. Only lasts for a few minutes anyway, bu. It affects me and everything in my proximity. I guess it's useful when I'm staying still. His eyes narrowed a bit at Tenten, who shivered under his gaze. But you could still see me. Guess that ity that you've been nurturing for me is almost finished. Shrugging his shoulders, he brought the skull to his lips and like a dish, started to slurp the dead clone's brains out of it like a thick paste, making Tenten vomit to one side when she saw the act. Hey, don't knock it until you try it. I know, eating raw things suck, but he started to ramble, and the T-13 clones were getting fed up with Tenten's behavior. There was still confusion, but Narbare stared at the roof until his eyes started to sting, puzzling out why Tenten was behaving this way and why Masato seemed to be missing. Tenten, the torture clone, said quietly, "Is there a man up there that's kinda dressed up like the boss with a hood over his head? You know, like Naruto?" She nodded fervently at him, and started to backpedal away from Ito and the T-13 specialists. Narbare looked up back at the roof. He took the bait. Is it you brain-sucking bastard? This next question got an answer from the man himself as he suddenly became visible, with blood spattering all over his upper chest, and stains around his mouth. Just grabbing some chow. Ito then looked down at his clothes, noting how messed up they were. Damn, I need a bib or towel or something. He got up and stretched as if he hadn't a care in the world, still barely paying the T-13 boys any mind as he tossed the halved skull away like a frisbee. Now I need a woman. Not you, Tenten-chan, he laughed, noticing the girl looking just about ready to make a mad dash to get away. Although I want something else from you. Must be really useful too. Have a sensory ability that works from paranoia, huh? Even better than sensing hell, you can sense anything. Enough of this shit, Naruto cursed, before pulling out 3 kunais out of a seal, each with 3 A-grade explosives attached. Before he even had a chance to throw them, Ito was suddenly in front of him, and thrust-kicked him away. Even as he was sent flying away, Ito was a blur of mauve. Emmett until he was at the point that the clone was knocked towards, and punched him in the head with a clothesline move. It was enough that it raised up a small cloud of dust. He wasn't getting up. So, I guess he was the annoying one? Ito drawled. My intel said that you all have different personalities. Nope, he's the rash one, Psychosis said with a grin as he pointed upwards. And your int. L should have said that you shouldn't have fucked with us. See those 8 birds and henges flying above your head? The rest of you? Ito balked in surprise as he looked up into the sky, only to see it empty. This was his undoing, as Naruto go up off of the ground and stabbed the man in his side with the tagged kunais before executing a hasty shunshin to get back to his brothers, just as the seal went off in a massive explosion with Ito at ground zero. The clones stood watching the gargantuan explosion, not even flinching as the shockwave blew everything back. Gentlemen, Narbare started to boast as he high-fived his fellow clones. That's how you pull off a distraction. Tenten stared at the explosion and struggled to stifle her phobia of it, before turning to the T-13 boys still celeb rating when she sensed that Ito was still close by. Why the hell are you cheering? She yelled at them. He's still alive. Oh, of course he is. There's no way that the boss would have made us if the guy was that easy to kill. Psychosis said matter-of-factly. Soon, explosion wore down and wafted away as smoke, revealing Ito who barely the worse for wear. Hey, Ito? Knock knock. Ito stared at the boy as if he was out of his mind, but thought the better of it. I guess you're supposed to be the dumb one? Kinda, but I'm just not as dumb as everyone else. Psychosis answered smugly, ning a knuckle to the head from Narcase in annoyance. Now come on, knock knock, who's there, Ligma? Ito gave the boy such a withering look that at least made him feel a bit ashamed. Alright, I guess that was a stretch, but I stalled long enough. He and the others watched as Ito suddenly coughed up blood and collapsed to his knees. Since you've got HIV, I thought that you'd be more careful. Why? Oh, you should really take care about who you try to cannibalize. Never know which one of us might be poisoning ourselves, you prick. Without even trying to brainstorm about how to finish off, Narbare LLED out the man's name and watched as ANBUs begin to storm in from all directions. He grabbed Tenten's hand and fled together with his comrades, not even paying the ensuing battle another mind. Well, that's that. Let them try to kill him. I wonder how no ninjas acted when all this mess started earlier. Damn, what a lax village. As if to interrupt him, Naruto spat out a red globule and groaned in pain. Damn, I feel like I got into a fist fight with Fu. How's my face look? Psychosis stared at his brother with the ugly punch mark on his mouth, and a noticeably black space where an incisor used to be. He glanced at the ground where the bloody spit had landed, and where it had seeped away into the dust, it left behind a tooth. Psychosis quickly took it up before the others could notice, and put it in his pocket. Knowing the doctor of their group could put it back in later. You look fine, let's get going. Hold up, Tenten piped up, not following them any further from the orphanage. Where are we going? A strange look came over Narbare's face as he paused. We're setting up shop somewhere else, since we got confirmation that he's targeting us. I guess the too obvious place at Naruto's house might not be good enough. When the word targeted was mentioned, Tenten grimaced at the memory of Masato dying and had to swallow back the taste of bile in her throat. You just said that this was just a confirmation, and his weird behavior from earlier, and you said that he was poisoning himself. So, you're just getting an epiphany that this was a setup with Masato as poison bait for a test? Psychosis asked stupidly. The timing was coincidental. We thought that Masato would have gotten targeted after he fully left the public eye, at least. Even so, what's done is done. We learned how that psycho feeds. And most importantly, how urgent that need is. Poisoning him was just done for the yucks. We know that we couldn't beat him anyway, handicapped or not. At least not with everyone present to even have a slim chance. Then why would you want me to come? And why would Masato agree to this? Me and the other clones have been setting this trap for 10 months, planning or Masato to leave the village from day one. You know, the weakest guy would make for easy pickings. Who knows? Maybe that cannibalistic shit thinks that our Yuki-laced brains are delicious. But Masato refused to leave the orphanage. It just happened today because Masato was forced to leave, and Ito realized that the village wouldn't miss him anymore. Funny thing, life. Psychosis shrugged as if it wasn't a big deal. But anyway, Masato wanted to talk to you. That's why we asked you to come. Even if you didn't come along, we would have dragged you along. So I guess we're done here. Without another word, he motioned to his comrades, and the trio left Tenten in Shunshin's. She stood in thought, wondering what her next move was. So the clone tasked with being a sacrificial bait postponed his part in the plan. But was still poisoning himself, lengthening out his torture? He postponed his part in the general plan to help kill the man that Naruto hated with a passion? All for what? Just to take care of some orphans? To be honest, it did sound like something that Naruto would do. She was so lost and confused. Trying to shake off these baggage emotions, she began to walk back to the orphanage. The sounds of fighting had long gone silent, and nothing left but a few Anbu ninjas who lied dead here and there amidst what looked like a small-scale battlefield on the dry front yard. Not wanting to look at them, she set her priorities to her surrogate brothers and sisters cowering in fear in the orphanage. When seeing her, they were about to ask her about what happened to Masato, but there was no need. Tenten was crying. When the lights came on, Naruto had to squint against the glare for a moment before his focus clicked in, and his eyes adjusted immediately. Alright, there's ONL. Why one woman who's this dramatic, he grumbled. But why the hell am I in this department? And how did an inquiry turn into an interrogation? Damn, Gaki. Anko's voice sounded muffled by the door BEF. Or she came in through the door with a small dossier in her hand. Naruto guessed that it was his. You didn't even give me a chance, 'cause I was just about to say that. Of course you were. Naruto pondered his next few thoughts for a while, and wondered about which to prioritize. Priority Haku 1. Hey, so where's Haku-chan? I didn't even get to see her at the inquiry, although Kurenai-sensei that she helped caused it. She's been here the whole time, Anko explained with a grin. Waiting just down the hall and chatting here and there whenever she's not worrying her pretty little head about you. Anko ruminated on a memory of seeing the girl trying to puzzle out what to masturbate to, and could barely hold in her laughter. A real goofball like you. Now, about why you're here. One more thing, Naruto interrupted, fidgeting in his bonds to the chair. Did the Hokage mention who my father was? Just in case I missed it when I got knocked out, or if you know, you can tell me. Since I was supposed to be told. He didn't spoil the secret, the woman said good-naturedly after staring at the darkened one-way on the other side of the room for a bit. And I don't know who. I've been instructed to just ask you a few questions, that's all. Well, call him in. Naruto retorted angrily, now realizing that the Hokage was mostly likely waiting in the room next to them. Before he could continue, a fist connected to his mouth that was hard enough to rattle every bone in his body. He felt a pang of fear along with his pain, before quickly adjusting the woman's killing intent. Looking back up at her with a bloody grin, he giggled a bit. I don't know for certain who my dad is, but of course I'll never get to know for certain if old man Hokage doesn't tell me. But I do know who Ito's mother and father are. I wonder. Naruto began to laugh harder, yet the serious look never left his eyes, and it was enough to jar Anko briefly. I just mentally contacted my brothers. Hit me again, and they'll broadcast one simple message. I wonder how it's going to look around all the great fucking nations when they find out who Ito's old man is. Anko cocked her arm back, ready to hit him even harder. It wasn't even a matter of pride or duty, or even because he made some threat. She took it as a dare, and she always a good sport for it. As simple as that. Maybe you don't understand. Naruto rolled his head around stupidly. Ito's been pissing in every cage's sake for years, murdering top-notch shinobi, wiping out clans to get a hold of their Kekai Genkai. If they get an ID on who he is, where he's from, who's responsible for letting him walk without reining him in, the leaf is going to get gangbanged by every great nation. Won't even be a war. Maybe a 2-month siege at best. Then the leaf will get slaughtered. She could follow his plotline, even though she thought it was complete bullshit. About to hit him in response to what could only be a bluff, her arm was caught NLY inches away from his face, and in the same second, all of the ropes tying Naruto to the chair fell apart as if cut to ribbons. The hell? Holding her back from hitting the boy was the Hokage himself, his expression unreadable. Hokage-sama? I was just. Don't worry, you're not at fault, Anko. Naruto is just being Naruto. He gave the Uzumaki a disappointed look, before lowering the Midarashi's hand. Although you were only meant to ask him a few questions. I was just skipping the foreplay, Naruto said hotly, before spitting the blood out of his mouth to one side. He got a small feeling of déjà vu for some reason, but ignored it. As Anko was told to leave the room, he was still talking. You probably wanted me in your office, but the ANBUs brought me here because it's where everyone who mentions his name ends up. Interrogating them about where they heard it, how they know it, the Uzumaki shook his head in disgust. Even when you're making the laws, you can't even follow them properly. Or even just break them when they're not doing anybody any good. The door clicked closed behind Anko, and seals began to go in effect, allowing for greater privacy. Only then did the Hokage allow himself to speak. And you're ever the saint, threatening to bring war to your home? Quote, I have been far more at home everywhere except the village hidden in the leaves. Naruto said seriously, it's just where I keep my stuff. Hiruzen stared at the boy as if he'd lost his mind, although he could tell that he was clearly lying. A bluff, but one that made him lose respect for the boy just for mentioning it. Regardless, Hiruzen too had lost a lot of face, and wondered how much more he was prepared to lose. If I had told you, presented you with a certificate, would you still have stayed in the village? The man asked quietly. It's one of the few things keeping you here, I imagine. Maybe, but does a certificate exist? And I getting it or not? Naruto asked abruptly, wanting to get straight to the point. I destroyed every document that I could find. Every document that ties you to the Yondaime as his son, the Sarutobi stated, noting the boy's disappointment, but those were his instructions. I have no idea why he'd go to such lengths, even if it was only to ensure that some secrets remained hidden. I'm sorry that I mislead you, but the only thing I have to offer is some vague command of his. Already getting up to leave, Naruto fumed to himself. He'd sold out too much just for some damn instruction or command or whatever the Yondaime. The letter informed me to tell you that you should just read some books. Hiruzen said after a while, feeling somewhat embarrassed for having nothing else to offer. I'm not even sure if he meant that literally. Naruto interrupted him here, preventing him from rambling on any more. Old man, let me stop you right there. When the Yondaime, he placed stress on that word, not calling the dead Kage his father yet, told you about all these things. Did it sound like he was protecting the secret that he was my dad, or was it for something else? Like my Kekai Genkai? He had no problems about you knowing about him, Hiruzen admitted shamelessly. That was all me, because I wanted you to grow up without having a target on your back." The man stopped here when he saw the strange look on the boy's face. "Ironic, I know. The villa. GE hasn't exactly treated you like a person, I concede that. But the village is still your H. Don't finish that, or you'll make me lose whatever sliver of respect I might still have for you," Naruto growled. "'Cause there's no way to defend that kind of shit that happened to me. Just tell me if he was trying to protect some secret about himself, or not. Secrets like knowledge, techniques, this damn seal on my forehead. I would presume so, but as I said, he only told me to tell you to read some books," Naruto mumbled as he tried to assess the situation. "Yeah, I got that part. I probably already got that clue he left for me, too." He looked up at the Hokage, wondering if the answer was at the top of the Hokage monument, just like the riddle seemed to hint. But he had gone up there searched the monument ever since getting the riddle on his birthday. Excusing himself, he asked to leave. Eager to be out of the boy's uncomfortable presence, Hiruzen pardoned him, and watched in silence. As the Uzumaki left the interrogation room, he made his way through the halls as if he knew them, but really didn't. All the while, he was lost in thought, trying to make sense of what his father did. Why he did what he did. The Kyuubi's strange silence wasn't helping either, and for the first time, Naruto didn't know what his next move was. His nagging curiosity that had festered for years wasn't helping either. "Master?" Naruto looked up in surprise, only to see Haku standing in a doorway to a staff lounge off to the side. Before he could even call out to greet her, the boy found himself hugged tightly, then kissed on the cheek by his servant. Not knowing if it was just ordinary manners or some sort of decorum for master-servant relations, he kissed her back before telling her that he had missed her. "I've missed you too, master." The girl beamed. All of a sudden, the large smile fell off her face and began to apologize profusely about causing the inquiry. "I hope I didn't cause you any distress." "Distress?" Naruto grimaced briefly before trying to appear nonchalant as they walked off. "No, not really." Caught in the lie, she reprimanded him for it, before she began apologizing again. "Don't worry it, Haku-chan. Nothing's really changed. Kinda sucks, though. There were things you told me in Wave. The things that you can do," she said softly, "and Enko-san has been talking to me after the inquiry. Telling me about all the things you said. I've gone and forced you to shed your secrets. Yeah, I'm really bummed about that. If I may say so, master, it was careless of you." Naruto looked at the girl in shock. She'd never chastised him before, but he started to laugh. "Yeah, but you called the Hokage out for being a liar. I guess we were both careless. I didn't get to find out if the Yondaime was my pops or not. But he is, isn't he?" The girl saw Naruto about to walk off in the wrong direction, before quickly steering to where the exit was. She wondered if he was merely wandering aimlessly, but she missed her home, and couldn't leave without him. "I know he is, but I don't know for sure, and I want answers about how he really died. Besides, even if that's the case, then where the heck is my mother? What happened to her? Why is this so important? Don't you already have a family in Wave?" Finally seeing the front door, the master and servant duo made a beeline for it. "You love them, and they love you the same. They'll always be my family," Naruto agreed, "but I want to avenge my parents. I've always been depressed, I guess. And I don't let go very well." Naruto lapsed silent, now falling back into his quiet confusion. Haku now felt awkward by the off-putting nature of it, but she didn't say anymore. She didn't want to risk dragging out of thought unless she had some idea of how to alleviate his nagging, and somewhat stupid, need to find out more about his parents. She could see no way that this was going to end well. They finally got out of the building, and started to make their way home, though it was on the far side of the village away from them. Along the way, they attracted attention, or Naruto did, to be specific. And Haku subconsciously began petering killing intent and forming bonds of ice gripped in between her fingers. It was unnerving to everyone as they looked away and gave them a wide berth. There were still a few who glared at them with a silent fury. These were also people who looked severely beaten up, and Haku found herself glad for some reason. People like this deserved comeuppance in the worst way. Finally free of the crowd, they continued walking up the street. It was now late evening, and night would soon fall. She looked over to Naruto, about to ask if they could possibly ninja run home, only to notice him staring at the Hokage monument in the distance, mumbling to himself. His mutters was actually that of the riddle he'd written while in his trance on his birthday, and now anxious that he was in yet another trance. Hastily asked him if he was all right. "My dad, huh?" he said out awkwardly, as if thinking out loud. He's probably the guy who always has a backup plan, and to him, either one of two things had to happen. Either the Sandaime Hokage would tell me some vague order to make me try to become knowledgeable, only to finally discover his favorite novel in the library, or my 14th birthday would trigger me to go find the book for myself as a default. That failsafe was what woke me up from the coma, I bet. But no matter what, I was always meant to get that damn riddle on my 14th birthday. Quote, "So have you figured it out? I keep thinking that it's the monument, but I've combed it over at least 3 times since then with my dojutsu, and I haven't found anything. It's something else." Haku thought about this for a while, before chortling out loud. "I wonder if the answer is Tenten. Her sensory abilities are absurd." The servant reasoned on this a little further, but something came to mind about what Tenten had said one day while they were in Naruto's hospital room. She once said that she felt paranoid for some reason while we were waiting on you to wake up from your coma. She said it felt like she and the rest of us were being watched, but the watcher was somewhere else. "What, like a telescope?" Naruto guessed. "No," she said. The person was looking down on all of us. But that would mean that the person was on the ceiling. There wasn't a camera, either. It was then that Hinata-san said that she heard a rumor about the Hokage being able to watch over any area in the village with a. Haku snapped her fingers, trying to remember the words that was on the tip of her tongue. "A crystal ball." "Yes, that's what she said." "Crystal ball?" Naruto couldn't believe it. He had heard about something like that, but thought that it was just a rumor as well. Yet he easily recalled the fact that they were pictures of the past cages in the office. His stride started to increase in speed, before he took off in a mad dash to get to the cage tower as quickly as possible. Haku nearly had to expend almost half of her chakra just to keep up with his urgent speed. She didn't dare stop to speak, lest she got left behind. They got to the tower fairly quickly, though it was well out of their way. Naruto nearly pulled the door off of the hinges to get inside the building. Up the stairs he went like a streak, and didn't even knock on the Hokage's door. Before he could barge in and likely get attacked by the ANBUs inside who defended the cage. Haku yelled that both she and Naruto was coming inside, only seconds before the doorknob came off in the boy's hand, and he threw the doors open. His eyes first rested on the Hokage. Ho had probably long arrived from using a shunshin and was now getting ready to sort out some paperwork, who had the crystal ball on his desk. "It's true." "What's true?" the Hokage said coolly as he watched the wild Uzumaki. It had been a whirlwind of a day, and the man had long ago decided to just accept that things were going to get worse and worse. The boy's servant was currently begging for I am to excuse the both of them for their actions, so it wasn't entirely awful. Even more to the point, his ANBUs weren't trying to kill the children either, so at least they were taking his cues properly this time. Unlike earlier at the end of the inquiry, "You have a crystal ball, so you can look at everywhere in the village." "I can, if I've seen the location before." He realized that Naruto wasn't even listening anymore, and was now staring at a picture of the Yondaime that hung on the wall, alongside with the other cage's portraits. "Just look at the picture," Naruto said excitedly, before gazing back at the crystal ball, then back at the picture. His eyes are always looking right where the old man always puts the crystal ball. He reached out and touched the frame of the picture, before activating his dojutsu. Recalling the strange riddle, "My picture looks over the village. It's worth a few hundred words." I bet he was just being literal and figurative at the same time, the bastard. The Uzumaki exclaimed, although his cursing sounded more like a happy compliment. His dojutsu outlined something of interest about the portrait, and Naruto pointed it out to Haku, who was starting to become excited herself from her master's exuberance. "Just look at it. The picture isn't even in the frame. It's on the frame." He grabbed at the portrait, and peeled off the large picture as if it was nothing more than a huge sticker, although it tore in a few places in his efforts to get it off. Flipping it over, he saw that there was some writing on the back. "Well, it's about damn time I got some answers." Still unable to contain his excitement, Naruto began to read the letter, and to give him some measure of privacy, Haku stepped back. This didn't stop her from feeling his drop in mood as he read it. And being his prisoner, so did Kurama. He'd remained quiet ever since his argument with the boy only hours prior. He'd been reminiscing about all he'd gone through with his container. For just over 8 years, he'd taken care of him, acted as his compass, his support, his chakra battery. He'd never wanted to be stuck inside him, but he never wanted to leave either, and not just because Naruto would die if he did. For the first time in centuries, Kurama had found companionship in the unlikeliest of allies, and although it could never be permanent, the beast never wanted it to end. Now, the Kyuubi waited in silence as he lost his friend. We will continue in next part.